Good afternoon. I call this meeting to order on September 13th, 2022, time 1:06 p.m. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Good afternoon. And good afternoon to everyone in Illinois. Good afternoon. My name is Harry Spicer. I'm the chairman of CHAP. And what I would like to do, I would like to do a roll call starting from my left to my right, and also we'd also like the staff to introduce themselves as well. So once again, Harry Spikes.
Eric Holcomb, Executive Director.
Afternoon, John Bullock, City Council Representative.
Capellan, Commissioner.
Peter Morrill, Commissioner.
Garrett Power, Commissioner.
Kate Edwards, DHCD.
Sarah Langmead, Commissioner.
Jill Dennis, Commissioner.
Gary Rodwell, Commissioner representing the Coppin Heights Community Development Corporation and Baltimore Heritage.
Catherine Good, Commissioner.
Nicole Battle, Commissioner representing Affordable Housing Developers.
Ann Powell, Commissioner representing Greater Baltimore Committee.
Tyreek Charlouse, CHAP Planner, City Planner 1.
Stacy Montgomery, CHAP Planner. And Anthony's all the way over there.
Anthony Stewart, CHAP Planner.
Anyone else? Okay. Commissioners, thank you. CHAP staff, thank you as well. Before we begin, there's a couple of line items and information I'd like to share with everyone in attendance. Beginning with this. The mission of CHAP is to enhance and promote the culture and economy of Baltimore through the preservation of buildings, structures, sites, and neighborhoods that have aesthetic, historic, and agricultural value. CHAP's goals include preserving historic architecture and monuments, reclaiming broken neighborhoods, preventing demolition by neglect, and integrating our city's past into its future. So we have a few housekeeping rules. There is an agenda outside at the front desk. For those of you who did not receive it, you're welcome to receive it. If you'd like to speak, we ask that you sign your name on the sheets outside. CHAP staff will let you know which sheet is in reference to whatever on the agenda item you'd like to talk about. Put your name on that. We usually allow people to speak between 2 and 3 minutes as it relates to public comment. After that, we'll call the next person. If there is no comment, we'll just move forward. And I normally don't have to do this, but if I go like this, that means you got 30 seconds left to speak, okay? I rarely slam it down, so you're good. So moving forward, I would like to put on the floor, I'd like to make a motion to waive the minutes of the meeting. Good. Are there any corrections or addition to the minutes that need to be made? Okay, thank you. With that being said, I'd like to make a motion to adapt the minutes. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. We will now go through our due process and procedures. CHAP reviews applications in conjunction with the building permit process of the permit section of the Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD. If a building permit application is filled prior to historic design review, the application is placed on hold pending completion of the CHAP review process. The review process is completed by an issuing an authorization to proceed. The historic design review process is in addition to other applicable laws and regulations and does not diminish the force of urban renewal plans, building codes, zoning codes, etc. It is the applicant's responsibility to comply with all applicable laws, regulation, and codes. Proposed projects are reviewed prior to issuing a building permit. Applicants must comply with the Baltimore City Historic Preservation Design Guidelines in planning and executing their projects. Design review considers the proposed work taking into consideration the historical and agricultural character of the structure and of the immediate area. Applicants will need to clearly explain whether their project complies with the design guidelines. Minor projects. In order to expedite the application process, the Commission has delegated review authority to the Executive Director for cases involving minor work. Minor projects must not significantly change the overall appearance or remove the significant undamaged historic fabric. Major projects. Major projects may change the overall character, appearance, and integrity of the structure. Substantial building alterations, demolitions, additions, and new construction are considered major projects and are reviewed at a public hearing. Interested parties should request a pre-development meeting in the planning department to begin the review process. An electronic version of all materials must be submitted to the CHAP staff at least 25 calendar days prior to the public hearing date. If the application is complete, the project shall be scheduled for a public hearing. CHAP hearings. At the public hearing, CHAP staff presents recommendations to the commission regarding the project. Following the staff presentation, the applicant may make a presentation to the commission, which you will see here today. Interested parties, including neighborhood associations, have the opportunity to provide public testimony. Following testimony, the commission renders a decision on the application at the public hearing. Persons aggrieved by the decision of the commission may seek judicial and appellate review in accordance with the Baltimore City Code. After authorization to proceed is issued, the applicant may obtain a building permit. The commission's process is impartial, and staff's comments are evidence that assist the commission in rendering decisions. Finally, I would like to ask for a motion to approve the final agenda for today. All in favor? Aye. Let us begin. On our consent agenda, we have 3 items: 1708 West Pratt Street, 1014 South Charles Street, 823 Light Street. On our consent agenda, do we have any comments from the commissioners, or shall we proceed? Okay. The consent agenda is approved. On to our regular agenda. Eddie, thank you, sir. On our regular agenda, we have 3818 Roland Avenue, potential landmark. Request designation as a potential landmark. Application, council member Odette Ramos. And our staff is Ms. Stacy Montgomery.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon. And the owner of the property is 3535 Chestnut LLC. And so this is a designation as a potential landmark. And we will, in this presentation, we'll talk about what a potential landmark is. All right. But first, let's talk about the property in question, 3818 Roland Avenue. So this building is located on the west side of Roland Avenue, south of Rectory Lane, and north of 38th Street on the northern edge of Hampton. Hampton is largely a neighborhood of late 19th and early 20th century row houses, interspersed with churches and several schools and other buildings like that. Here we see the building from an aerial view. Immediately to the north of 3818 Roland Avenue on the north side of Rectory Lane is a large apartment tower. There's a parking lot to the south where there used to be 3 row houses, and an industrial building just to the west of the building at the back along Rectory Lane. The east side of Roland Avenue is predominantly row houses, but there is existing a Baltimore City landmark. I don't know if I can get the laser pointer to work, but at the top right-hand corner, the single freestanding white building is the Shelley House, which is already a Baltimore City landmark. Thank you. Here we see 3818 Roland Avenue, sort of an aerial facing west. Here we see it, the south side of it facing north. All right, but let's talk about the architecture of this interesting building. So the house at 3818 Roland Avenue, which was historically known as 518 Roland Avenue, is a 2-story Renaissance Revival brick dwelling with a square brick bay projecting from the front facade, a 2-story wooden wraparound porch, 2 projecting bays on the side elevations, and 1 2-story projecting frame bay on the north elevation. The building has a flat roof with a wooden cornice that wraps around the front facade. There's a bracketed Italianate cornice on the south elevation. There's a simpler cornice over the 2-story brick bay on the north elevation. The house has a 2-story frame bay addition and a 2-bay garage at the rear of the lot. There are a variety of window configurations, but they're all generally double hung windows with and they're predominantly wood. The windows on the facade have a decorative multi-light top sash with a single light bottom, and the second-story windows have brick jack arch lintels with a thin decorative band of darker brick running between the lintels and wrapping around the building's facade. The windows on the south elevation are all sorts of configurations, 1/1, 2/2, 4/4, 6/6, as this elevation has been enlarged many times during the early part of the 20th century. The two-story wraparound porch is one of the most distinctive features of this building. The wooden porch spans the front facade and wraps around the southeastern corner of the building and runs to the back edge of the projecting brick bay on the south elevation. Both stories have a wooden railing with square balusters, but the first story has Doric columns supporting the porch roof with a tall entablature below a cornice. And the upper story railing spans between square wooden columns. A shallow pedimented roof tops the second-story porch on the south elevation. The frame additions on the rear have been altered and expanded over time and are now attached to the garage, but this garage was initially constructed, or a garage was initially constructed between 1906 and 1914 on the site. So here we have a nice close-up view of sort of that south elevation with the wraparound porch, and you can see it on the second story with the roof over. I'm sorry, there's a little tree there. And you can see just all the different configurations of windows happening on the south elevation. And in the back, on the lower left-hand side, you can see that kind of projecting brick bay. And then this is the north elevation along Rectory Lane, which has that same projecting brick bay, except it's 2 stories. But then there's also this really nice second-story frame bay with brackets under it. So, and then here we can see the back with the garage and the 2-story addition. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the Renaissance Revival style, which is the style that this house was built in, and some places where we might see some pieces of this, but not what we see here. The Renaissance Revival style gained popularity in the United States in the last decades of the 19th century. In Baltimore, the work of the architectural firm McKim, Mead & White was heavily influential on the adaptation of the style to residential building. In Baltimore, the style was predominated by a flat roof, flat facade, and brown brick row houses with minimal ornamental detail. Builders constructed what are known as swell front row houses with rounded or squared projecting bays. While this square bay form can be found in the row house form in Baltimore, its detached form is uncommon. The other bays on the house on 3818 Roland Avenue and that 2-story front porch combine to make something that is unique and distinctive and different from a row house form. All right, so let's talk about the chronology of construction here. So in 1887, the property in question transferred to Arthur Jackson from a gentleman named Moses Walter. In 1887, Hamden was still part of Baltimore County, but would be annexed into Baltimore City in 1888. The building at 3818 Roland Avenue, which was then 518 Roland Avenue, first appeared on the 1894 City of Baltimore topographical map, meaning that Arthur Jackson was likely responsible for the initial construction of the building. You can see his name next to the building there on the map. In 1902, the building was sold by Arthur Jackson to Catherine Kate Chambers, who bought the property after several years of renting it. So here you can see, still in 1896, the property is attributed to Mr. Jackson. And you can see that little bay. Here we have, this is the 1902 Sanborn map. So the building appears on the 1902 Sanborn map as a 2-story brick house with a side porch. There's a small warehouse and stable in the rear on what was then known as Church Lane or St. Mary's Lane, but it's now Rectory Lane. There's an angled brick bay on the Church Lane side, a square brick bay on the south elevation, and both 1- and 2-story rear additions. In 1903, Kate Chambers obtained a permit to build a 2nd story on a square bay on the south elevation, and in 1906, she got a permit to build another addition. So she was quickly improving the property. Here we see a 1914 topographical map of the property. All right, let's talk. This is 1914 to 1915. Just interestingly, Catherine Chambers' brother-in-law sold some horses from this property and some horse feed, so that's why there's a stable. The buildings marked with big X's are stables. So he was selling some horses back here. All right. So not shown, but in 1920, the 1928 to 1936 Sanborn map shows a one-story front porch and two-story porch on the south side, and the second-story angled bay on the northeast corner of the facade, and a new angled bay at the southeast corner of the south elevation. There's also a new, larger garage in the rear of the property at this point. The rear frame addition was enlarged to its current size after 1954, but this map shows the main building configured almost to what it is today, save for the size of the rear addition and the garage. And the last changes to this map would have been at most 1951. So let's talk about the context of this property and why, aside from its architecture, that it's significant. So this building was constructed in the late 19th century. It was the home of a dressmaker named Kate or Catherine Chambers. Catherine Chambers was born on a farm in Howard County and she was born in the 1860s to Levi and Mary Chambers. Kate and her family moved to Baltimore when she was 9 years old, settling in Woodbury. Kate and her family moved to Baltimore, Kate and her 9 siblings, many of her 9 siblings, worked in a cotton mill, and they attended Woodbury M.E. Church with their parents. In the fall of 1897, Kate moved with her family to the house on Roland Avenue, which was then 518 Roland Avenue. In the 1900 census pictured here, Kate, who's age 33, is listed as the head of the household here. Even though she's living with her elderly father, she also lives with her sister, her nephew, and a female boarder. And Kate, along with her sister Carrie and the boarder, are all working as dressmakers living in this home. So here we see it actually labeled. This is a 1906 map, and it's labeled Catherine Chambers. She purchased the property, although she'd been renting it since before 1900. She purchased the property in 1902 from Arthur Jackson for $1,600, and she quickly began improving the property and expanding it. In January of 1903, she bought the adjoining lots and constructed a second-story addition on the south elevation. In January of 1904, she bought a third adjacent lot from Arthur Jackson, the same owner, and in 1906, she built another addition. In 1907, since she had improved the property a lot, she joined her neighbors in one of a number of what were called annex tax suits that were brought against the city during this era, contesting the city's collection of property taxes at the full city tax rate for properties that had just been annexed into the city in 1888. There are similar tax suits like this around the city, but Kate had enough property to feel aggrieved by this higher tax rate and to join the suit, which was predominantly men on the lawsuit. While she was improving her own property at 3818 Roland Avenue, Kate also invested in other real estate in Hamden. In 1910, she purchased a lot with many improved dwellings on the west side of Hickory Avenue with her brothers Levi and James Chambers for $6,000. Her brother Levi Chambers was a successful builder who constructed many of the homes in Guilford, Homeland, and Roland Park. In 1911, Kate got a building permit to construct 9 two-story dwellings on the south side of West 37th Street between Hickory Avenue and Falls Road. Those are what's pictured here. A notice in the Sun said that the houses would be 2-story brick dwellings with metal cornices and steam heat. They were designed by the architect H.J. Tinley, and each cost $18,000. The houses, they're still standing here on the 1100 block of West 37th Street. All right. In December of 1909, Kate Chambers, who was then about 36 years old, married Dr. Harry Naylor. He was an English doctor, or an English-born dentist, who was living in Baltimore. Kate's brother, Dr. Morgan Chambers, who was a Methodist Episcopal minister, performed the ceremony. The couple continued to live at the house at 3818 Roland Avenue, where Kate ran her dressmaking business from her home. Although she was married, she was still listed professionally as Kate or Catherine Chambers, as I can sort of see in this 1921 city directory under Chambers. Her name is there. You can also see her brother Levi. You can see L. Morgan, the Reverend. Her family's very ingrained into Baltimore. So she's still listed as Kate Chambers, although it does suggest that she has another last name that's Naylor, but she's listed under Chambers still. Like Kate, her husband, Harry, also invested in real estate. He purchased some lots further up on Roland near University and constructed an apartment building. By 1940, Kate and her husband lived in that block further north at 4135 Roland Avenue with her niece, Beulah, who was also a dressmaker, and several other boarders. Okay, so this is the picture, one picture I could find of Catherine Chambers Naylor, growing corn in her backyard in Roland Park. So, since her girlhood, Kate was involved in the Woodbury ME Church, continuing her involvement long after she moved to Roland Avenue. Her financial success not only allowed her to purchase the home at 3818 Roland Avenue, but it allowed her to move up in Baltimore society. In 1899, she's listed under a group of ladies visiting Atlantic City. In 1907, she sailed to the Jamestown Exposition with members of the Builders Exchange for a 3-day trip. Kate may have been involved in the Builders Exchange on her own or because of her relationship with her brothers. It's not clear. In the 1930s, Kate Chambers Naylor was an active member of many exclusive women's civic organizations, including the Women's City Club, the Women's Southern Club, and the Women's Club of Roland Park. Kate Chambers Naylor, she died on December 21st, 1944, at her home at 4135 Roland Avenue, so again, just up the street. She was still the owner of the property at 3818 Roland Avenue at the time of her death. In 1946, her husband, Dr. Harry Naylor, and his new wife, who was her niece, Beulah, they sold the house. Yeah, they sold stayed in the family. They sold the house to Lawrence and Elizabeth Orts, and then 2 years later, the Orts sold it to Austin and Anna Donovan, who opened a funeral home in the property. They operated that funeral home until 1970, when it was sold to Alan Seitz, who operated a funeral home there until 2000, when the Good Shepherd United Methodist Church took ownership of the property, and in 2002, the Junior League of Baltimore improved the property. They did a renovation of the property. So why are we talking about Kate Chambers? Well, she took what was probably a skill she learned as a child working in a factory and became a successful dressmaker. Her skills brought her the financial freedom to purchase a large home to support her family, her father, and her sisters. It also allowed her to invest and develop in real estate. All this allowed her to gain upward social mobility, to travel, to gain entry into some of Baltimore's more exclusive social groups. Even after she married in 1909, she retained a professional identity tied to her maiden name and continued to run a successful business and mentor others, as evidenced by the many dressmakers that continue to live with her. Her success and financial independence at a time when many women were dependent on their fathers, their husbands, and brothers is an important story about women in early 20th century Baltimore. Oh, so the background, I'm sorry, go back. So just the background here, Councilwoman Ramos initiated the potential landmark designation request in May of 2022 and made the formal request in July of 2022. And since then introduced the landmark designation bill into City Council. That was on August 15th. But due to the timing of the specific notification requirements tied to each designation process, CHAP must provide a separate posting and notification. So we'll have a separate item about this landmark designation later this year, hopefully next month. All right, so the proposal is to designate this property as a potential landmark. The potential landmark list provides an immediate but temporary protection for historically significant properties. Notably, the properties on the potential landmark list, the protections, of the potential landmark list begin as soon as notice for the CHAP hearing has been posted, which means that the property is subject to CHAP review immediately after posting. If the property is designated to the potential landmark list, the time frame of protections are limited. They're limited in the following ways. 1, 180 days after the commission's decision to add the structure to the list, unless before that date a proposed ordinance is introduced into City Council to add the structure to the landmark list. Or 2, if a proposed landmark ordinance is introduced in the City Council before that 180th day, but has not yet been enacted, 18 months from the date of the proposed ordinance introduction. If a property is designated to the landmark list, then will continue to receive the full protection of the CHAP ordinance. So the potential landmark list is immediate but temporary. All right, so the application of guidelines. For requests to designate properties as potential landmarks, CHAP staff applies the guidelines for designation of properties of the same that we use for designating historic landmarks and districts. And they're listed here on this page. There's 4 criteria. And of those criteria, staff determined that this property meets 2 of the 4. It only has to meet 1. But we've determined it meets 2. First, that it's associated with with the events that have made a significant contribution to the broad patterns of Baltimore history. And number 3, that it embodies the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction, or that represent the work of a master, or that possess high artistic values, or that represent a significant and distinguishable entity whose components may lack individual distinction. The designation criteria also mirror those of the National Register, but focus on Baltimore. All right. So staff finds that the property meets criteria 1 and 3 because the property at 3818 Roland Avenue is significant for its length of female homeownership in the early 20th century, specifically for its association with Catherine Kate Chambers Naylor, a dressmaker who owned the property from 1902 to 1944 and made many of the improvements to the property. The property is also significant for its architecture. The Renaissance Revival House at 3818 Roland Avenue is a unique and distinctive brick home with brick front bays and a 2-story porch. The building was constructed in the late 19th century and underwent its most significant alterations during the ownership of Kate Chambers Naylor. So the staff recommendation is a finding of approval for designation because this property meets criteria 1 and 3. Thank you.
Stacy, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions for Stacy?
I do have a question.
Sure.
I'm looking at the city view map. Is it correct that there's a National Register Historic District in Hamden, but not a city
That's
historic
correct.
district?
Hamden is a National Register Historic District.
Is there, is there a thought that Hamden would become a city historic district? That's
That I don't know. Not to my knowledge.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Did you look into A. Roberts, the builder, at all? Just out of curiosity, or
Sorry.
was it A. Roberts, or who is it on the map?
Jackson.
Jackson.
So it was interesting. I did look into him, and he was, a Sun article described him as a very modest man who was just really involved with his church. But then he did own like a whole lot of property, but he seemed to just be a person who was sort of speculatively like buying property and selling property. But he was also a very modest man who just, but not as much as Catherine Chambers, but that was kind of what I came across, is that he, and I did find his name associated with some other properties, because he owned not just that house, but he owned a bunch of the other land around there that he ended up selling to Kate Chambers in the early 1900s too.
Just quick, 2 questions. One was, the site seemed to have changed at one point. I'm assuming there was a subdivision or whatever. And then the second question, there's additional buildings on the back. What happens to those during a landmark when they're kind of towards the later part of construction?
So the additions that are attached to the building, or, there were buildings that were historically a part of the property that were I'm just going back, that were like like here, that don't exist anymore, right? The sheds and things like that, sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to use here we go. I think I got the pointer, maybe, no. Okay, I got it, okay. So like these buildings don't exist anymore. This is where there's a separate lot now, and a more kind of industrial, like warehouse type building there. Or it's not part of the property. Sorry, I'm trying to go back to. So the property ends where the garage is.
Oh, I see.
So it would just be for this building. That's all connected at this point. Yes, for the whole structure. Yeah.
Commissioners, any other commissioners like to speak? Okay. At this point, we have 2 names on our list for public comment. I'd like to invite Councilwoman Ramos to the stage.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Members, it's wonderful to see you all in person. I think the last hearing that I was able to be a part of for a building in Coldstream Homestead, Montebello, was virtual. So I want to thank you for all of your work that you're doing for our communities. This request came from the Hamden Community Council and also residents along Roland Avenue who live across the street and surrounding the building. There's a lot of development happening now in Hamden, and the residents were interested in preserving the history of this building. And as we were looking into it, it was very exciting to learn more about Catherine Chambers and the fact that she was, really made made it for herself in a time when that was totally unusual for women. So that was very exciting. It is a wonderful building, very unique to the area, so it's important to preserve the architecture and to make sure that we allow for people to understand and learn the history as well. So I really thank you for your consideration. I have put in the permanent landmark status, and so we'll be working with you on that as well. Again, the community was just interested in making sure that we're not compromising the integrity of this amazing architectural structure while also learning a lot about the woman who, was Catherine Chambers. Just so you know, in your question around subdivision, at one point in time, the parking lot next to it was part of the building. And when the church sold the building, they wanted to keep the parking lot for themselves. So that parking lot, where there were houses at one time, still belongs to the church down the street, a couple houses down. So the building itself is just the building that we're just talking about. And then there's a business along the alley behind there that's a warehouse business. So anyway, if you've driven down Roland Avenue, this is a very unique historical building, and so we certainly want to keep it that way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We now have Adam Carbello. Are you in the room? Adam? Going once, going twice. Okay, Adam's not here. So now I take it back to the commissioners. Commissioners, we have on the table the recommendation. Staff recommends a finding of approval for designation of this property as a potential landmark and as a Baltimore City landmark because it meets criteria 1 and 3 of CHAP's criteria for designation. Do I have a motion for that recommendation? Okay.
No, I know. That was colloquialism, I know. Does the owner of the property want the designation?
The representative for the owner is here. I don't know if he wants to speak, but we've been in contact and they are not opposing the designation.
Not opposed.
So as somebody who lives a block down, this makes me very happy. So I would love to make the motion for approval of staff recommendation for potential landmark designation.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Next on our agenda, we have Sarah Ann Street Historic District designation. This is a requested designation as Baltimore City Historic District. Application, the Poppleton Neighborhood Association. And once again, Ms. Stacy Montgomery.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon. So we have, again, Sarah Ann Street Historic District Designation Hearing 2. The applicant is Poppleton Neighborhood Association. I'm Stacy Montgomery. I'm the staff person. So quickly, before we jump into Hearing 2, we'll just talk about what happened at Designation Hearing 1, which was just 1 month ago. The proposed designation for the Sarah Ann Street, these were the findings of the commission last month, that the proposed designation of Sarah Ann Street as a local historic district meets CHAP criteria for evaluation 1 and 3. The proposed boundaries are supported by findings of fact, that the outreach to property owners and property owner responses were sufficient, and that it was then directed staff to prepare a full and proper study with findings of fact for presentation at Designation Hearing 2. So here we are. All right, and just to refresh everybody's memory, these are the boundaries which are unchanged since the last hearing, just last month. All right, so first we'll talk about the site and the historic district. So situated near the northwest corner of the Poppleton neighborhood, the proposed Sarah Ann Street Historic District includes a block of 11 alley houses on the north side of 1100 block of Sarah Ann Street and 2 row houses on the east side of the 300 block of North Carrollton Street. The Poppleton neighborhood largely is bounded by West Mulberry Street to the north, West Baltimore Street to the south, Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard to the east, and North Carey Street to the west. The southeast side of the neighborhood is densely packed with residential, commercial, and medical facilities, while the northwest section is home to a few churches and remaining row houses. Here we see the Poppleton neighborhood outlined in sort of that teal color, and the district area is circled in red. All right, so let's talk about the Sarah Ann Street row houses first. In Sarah Ann Street, which was historically known as Harmony Lane, is home to a row of intact alley houses. 10 of these houses are 2 stories high and 2 bays wide and 2 rooms deep. The house at 1102 Sarah Ann Street, which is the structure at the end of the block, is 3 stories high, as was 1124 Sarah Ann Street, which was demolished in the 1930s. So that left a row of 2-story row houses bookended by 3-story row houses. They were built in 1870 as a row of 12 houses. Each row house had slanting flat roofs in the then popular Italianate style with simple wooden cornices set above a slightly projecting brick frieze with brick modillions. This cornice imitates the style of the more elaborate cornices of the 3-story Italianate row houses, which have wooden cornices framed by scroll saw end brackets that have friezes decorated with scroll saw and modillions. The alley houses have simple flat door and window lintels and sills and may have originally had 2/2 sash windows, but no original sash remains, and most of the windows are now 1/1. Each doorway has a narrow transom, which was probably originally 2 lights, which is seen on 1110 Sarah Ann Street today. And now the masonry facades have been painted. Each house, as I said, was only 2 rooms deep with a stair located on the western wall directly behind the doorway. There's no vestibule or entry space. On the rear elevations, there's a small square window, and then there's also a small yard in each property. So now we're going to go to North Carrollton Street, and I apologize if the photo's blurry, but I think what I wanted to show that this is actually there was a row here. In 1978, there was a row of row houses here, and that's part of this story. Okay. The houses at 319 to 321 North Carrollton Street are they now are just 2 3-story brick row houses with simple dentil cornices and a tall painted stone base and marble steps. They have decorative brick door surrounds and arched brick header lintels. 319 North Carrollton Street retains its historic window height with a stone sill, while the windows of 321 North Carrollton Street have been shortened. The 2 houses are the last of a row of 8 Italianate row houses with wooden cornices and bracketed with a lower band of trim. So you can see here in this image from 1978, the whole row. And the 2 that we're talking about are the two remaining are these 2 right here. So you can see the historic cornice that ran the block, and there's 2. Okay. I just think it's important to understand the bigger context. Okay. So the windows were likely originally 2/2, and the 2 remaining wood houses now are just kind of bookended by concrete walls. And the historic cornices, I think, were removed between 1950 and 1970. So now we're going to talk about the historic significance and the summary and the physical development. So it's situated in the northwest corner of the Poppleton neighborhood. This group of houses demonstrates the distinctive characteristics of construction in the 1870s. The Sarah Ann Street alley houses represent an increasingly rare building type in Baltimore and older East Coast cities. Alley houses represent a small-scale house type built on narrow, small streets that parallel or bisected wider streets. With middle-class housing. Alley houses provided housing for Baltimore's working-class residents. They are simplified versions of larger row houses ornamented with various architectural styles. Today, the majority of alley houses built in Baltimore and in other East Coast cities have been demolished, making Sarah Ann Street a rare survivor in Baltimore and on the East Coast. Alley houses are integral to the historic fabric of Baltimore's row house neighborhoods, helping to define the intimate human scale of the 19th century Baltimore. In the Poppleton neighborhood, the houses on Sarah Ann Street, this block of houses is the last block of alley houses standing. The properties within the proposed district also provide significant representation of the underdocumented history of Black homeownership and residency in Baltimore in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The houses on North Carrollton Street were constructed in the early 1870s, and they have been in African-American homeownership since 1928. The Sarah Ann Street alley houses were built in the same time period and provided affordable housing to African Americans after the Civil War. Together, this group of historic homes serves as an important resource about African American life in Baltimore City. All right. Physical development. Actually, sorry, before we jump into this is, I wanted to talk about these pictures here. I'm sorry for jumping around, but so this is a sketch of kind of what the houses on Sarah Ann Street might have looked like on the interior. All from these, Mary Ellen Hayward featured these row houses a lot in a lot of her writing. So this is the block of Sarah Ann Street that still stands. But on the south side of Sarah Ann Street, this was a row of row houses that sat on the south side on the 1100 block. They're gone. In 2008, when Mary Ellen Hayward wrote a book, they were standing. They're gone. The demolition is part of this story of why this row is so important, because so much of this resource keeps getting lost. So I think I wanted to show that too, that was standing across the street. It's not anymore. Okay. The neighborhood of Poppleton was established in the first half of the 19th century. It was named for the surveyor Thomas Poppleton, who created the street grid of the land annexed to Baltimore City in 1816. During the period from 1800 to 1850, Baltimore City encouraged westward development, and Poppleton's development occurred east to west as a result. Like other early 19th century Baltimore neighborhoods, Poppleton's main streets were lined with larger homes that accommodated wealthier white professionals, while smaller alley streets accommodated more modest dwellings to house working class, both white and black. By the late 19th century, as wealthier Baltimoreans moved further from the city center, houses along the main thoroughfares of Poppleton, like Baltimore and Lexington streets, added commercial uses to the first floor with residential space in the upper stories. The development of the block that's home to the proposed Sarah Ann Historic District occurred in the 1870s. So here we see the 1869 Saxon Company map of the area that shows just 10 row houses fronting on Saratoga Street and one row house that was on Oregon Street, which is now South Arlington Street. And there's no buildings on Republican Street, that's now North Carrollton Street, or West Mulberry Street. So the red square represents approximately where the district would be. And you can see that there's nothing there then in 1869 or 1868. All right, but then by 1876, the Atlas of Baltimore City and Baltimore County shows both the north side of Harmony Lane, which was originally what Sarah Ann Street was known as, and the portion of North Carrollton Street north of Harmony Lane with a row of houses. So our district is there in 1876. And here we have the 1885 Brownlee map of Baltimore City, which shows the entire block bounded by Carrollton, West Mulberry, North Arlington, and West Saratoga Street, developed with Harmony Lane, now shown as Sarah Ann Street. And really, for a bit of the late 19th, early 20th century, some maps show it as Sarah Ann, some maps show it as Harmony Lane. Went back, it depended on who was doing the map, I guess. So here we see it in 1902 as Harmony Lane still. In 1902, the Sanborn Fire Insurance map shows the 1100 block of Sarah Ann Street was home to 12 alley houses, 10 two-story row houses, bounded by 2 three-story row houses. The south side of Sarah Ann Street and Carlton Street, which is the little other alley street that bisects Sarah Ann, this is Carlton Street here, were built up with 2-story row houses and a few stables. At the same time, the 300 block of North Carrollton Street was lined with 3-story row houses from West Saratoga Street to West Mulberry Street, with one store at the southeast corner of North Carrollton and West Saratoga Street. So just at the very, sorry, I find the mouse is a little challenging. Here we go. There's a store there. In 1914 to 1915, that Sanborn map shows very little has changed. And to the next map here, but by 1951, and actually it was demolished in the 1930s, 1124 Sarah Ann Street, which is pointed to by the blue arrow, is not present anymore. Okay. So the 20th century brought more change to Poppleton, a neighborhood that had been on the fringes of the city before the Civil War. Now that the city had expanded far west of Poppleton, even the newer houses in the neighborhood were considered old and outdated as they lacked some modern amenities. In the 1930s, housing from the 1840s was demolished for the construction of the Poe homes. Additional demolition occurred in the middle of the 20th century as the city eyed the area just north of Poppleton for a new expressway. The expressway between West Franklin Street and Mulberry Street, and the impact of this demolition and highway construction had lasting impacts on the surrounding communities. The block where the proposed Sarah Ann Street Historic District is located is just south of that roadbed on the highway project. And demolition really has been ongoing in the Poppleton neighborhood to present day. Now there's another project, the Center West project, where there's a lot, and these properties were within that area until recently. So there's continuing demolition and now some redevelopment. All right. So let's talk about the social and cultural history. So Poppleton's proximity to the B&O rail yards and manufacturing businesses made it an attractive place for working class Baltimoreans to live in the 19th century. Irish and German immigrants settled on the main streets, including the 300 block of North Carrollton Avenue. 319 North Carrollton Avenue was originally sold to J. Thomas Scharf, who was a notable 19th century historian and author of books on the history of Maryland and Baltimore. And the home remained in white ownership until 1928. But Poppleton was home to African Americans since the mid-19th century, at least. Maryland had the highest free black population in the Union prior to the Civil War, and many of those residents lived in Baltimore City where they could find employment. The 1860s federal census listed 30 black residents in Poppleton, which may have only included the free black population and not those who were enslaved. Sarah Ann Street, which was also known as Harmony Lane, ran through a stretch of the western edge of Baltimore City and has been home to African Americans in the second half of the 19th century. The 1100 block of Sarah Ann Street exclusively housed African Americans by 1880 and remained so into the 20th century. While the majority of the homes on Sarah Ann Street were rented by African Americans from white owners, there were two early African American property owners on the block. In 1873, a few years after the houses were constructed, Catherine Kennedy, who was a black laundress and cook, purchased the property at 1102 Sarah Ann Street, pictured here. And she owned the home for 13 years until she sold it in 1886 to another white owner. Then at the other end of the block, the house that's now been demolished, 1124 Sarah Ann Street, also had a black homeowner, Luberta Williams, who purchased the property in 1905, and she lived in the property for a few years before she rented it and moved up to Druid Hill Avenue. But she owned the property until 1928, and it was demolished not long after that. And then we'll talk about the 300 block of North Carrollton Street, which was exclusively home to white residents according to the 1920s federal census. However, by the 1930 census, the block had only one white resident. Similarly, the ownership on the block was exclusively white until 1928, when Joseph and Mary Sewell purchased the property at 319 North Carrollton Street. The property remained in the Sewell family until 1996, when the Eady family purchased the property. So we'll talk about the architecture. Okay. The proposed Sarah Ann Street Historic District is significant for its collection of extended alley houses lining the north side of Sarah Ann Street. The alley house is an important housing type in the architectural history of Baltimore City. As immigrants and free blacks moved to large cities for jobs in the mid-19th century, the need to house the working class created a challenge for those cities. New York City solved this by constructing tenement buildings, which crammed multiple families into small spaces and created health and safety issues. In Baltimore and Philadelphia, they constructed alley houses, small versions of traditional row houses along inner blocks. In Philadelphia, alley house construction stopped during the Civil War. After the Civil War, Washington, D.C. constructed alley housing. However, the alley house tradition in Baltimore began in Fells Point before 1800 and continued to be built throughout in row house neighborhoods throughout the city into the early 20th century, demonstrating a very long heritage of this building typology. Today, Baltimore City is home to one of the largest collections of extant alley housing. However, the block on Sarah Ann Street is the only remaining block in Poppleton, and all that remains of this alley street that was home historically, that stretched through much of Baltimore and that was home to many African Americans. In 1981, the block was featured on the cover of the Baltimore Sunday Sun magazine for a long article about alley housing by architectural historian Mary Ellen Hayward, who also wrote her 2008 book on row houses. And she called these houses much plainer, simpler, with brick dentil cornices, because she was looking still at those houses on the south side of Sarah Ann Street that aren't there anymore. Okay. In the 1990s, demolition of alley houses was put forward as one strategy to combat the growing number of vacant houses in Baltimore City. Alley houses were targeted in part because of belief that, quote, no one wanted to live in a house that small. Attitudes towards smaller houses have certainly evolved over the last 2 decades. However, the city's stock of alley houses has continued to shrink. When Mary Ellen Hayward, as I said, wrote her book in 2008, there were still alley houses on the south side of the 1100 block of Sarah Ann Street. As alley housing becomes rarer, the preservation of this resource, which provided housing to Baltimore's working class for 2 centuries, becomes more crucial. All right, so we've talked about the history. Now we're going to talk about the period of significance for this district. And it's 1870, I'm proposing 1870 to 1975, the beginning date being the development of this site, 1870. The end date being the two items that sort of changed the trajectory of this district and the neighborhood. The first is the construction of the Franklin-Mulberry Expressway segment that was completed that year, and that's also the year that the Poppleton Urban Renewal Plan was created. And I did, through the presentation, there's been some images from the Poppleton report. There wasn't a lot of preservation in that plan, so, all right. The boundaries of the historic district. So the boundaries of the proposed local historic district include 2 houses and their lots on North Carrollton Street. That's 319 to 321 North Carrollton Street. And the alley houses and the lot 1102 to 1124 Sarah Ann Street. This includes 13 intact houses and 2 lots where demolition occurred more than 20 years ago. Thus, it will include an intact alley row and the remaining portion of a 3-story row. The 13 houses include a rare surviving group of alley houses and homes associated with African American life and home ownership in Baltimore. So as part of this district designation, there needs to be finding of fact. I did, in the staff report, there's a detailed list or information on each of these items and what they are, but here are the items that this district designation has to comply with. So the following findings of fact support that the proposed district and its boundaries comply with the following. First, requirements for local government certification under the National Historic Preservation Act. That information is in the larger staff report. Second, the Secretary of the Interior standards for identification and registration. And third, the historic preservation procedures and guidelines of the Baltimore City Commission for Historical and Architectural Preservation, also in the packet. The criteria for evaluation. So staff applied criteria for evaluation that are in section 2.2 for designating historic districts and landmarks of CHAP's rules and regulations. As the previous item, I did show the 4 items that the district has to meet. One of the 4 items, one that's associated with the events that have made a significant contribution to the broad patterns of Baltimore history. 2, that's associated with the lives of persons significant in Baltimore's past. 3, that they embody the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction, or that represent the work of a master, or that possess high artistic values, or that represent a significant and distinguishable entity whose components may lack individual distinction, or that they've yielded or may be likely to yield important information in Baltimore history or prehistory. So staff determined that the Sarah Ann Street district is eligible under criteria 1 and 3. And they've determined that based on step 1, the historical assessment and property owner survey, and step 2, the analysis of the Sarah Ann Street Historic District designation, that it should proceed to step 3, which is the designation. At the August 9th, 2022 hearing, the commission concurred with this finding and directed staff to produce this full and proper study. And so CHAP staff believes that the designation meets criterion 1, that the proposed Sarah Ann Street Historic District is significant because it represents the housing and home ownership of African Americans over a period from the 1870s to present, really. And Sarah Ann Street represents unique African-American resources. Secondly, that the proposed Sarah Ann Street Historic District is significant under criterion 3 for representing a unique and intact building type known as alley houses, a rare survivor of Baltimore's 19th century working class housing. Also, part of the designation process, we have to talk about non-contributing buildings. On this slide, you'll see a list of things that would make something non-contributing. Staff determined through a survey of the properties within the proposed district that there were no non-contributing properties. Non-contributing properties are those which fall outside the period of significance, which lack architectural integrity, or which hold no association to the district or the city's history. As no information is gained about the district and its buildings, the commission can reevaluate these decisions. Community input. We've had throughout all of these hearings substantial community input, and I believe there will be some more today. So the staff recommendation. Staff recommends approval of the determination that the proposed designation of Sarah Ann Street as a local historic district meets the requirements of the Baltimore City Historic Preservation Rules and Regulations designation of districts and landmarks. The designation includes a full and proper study with findings of fact that the proposed district and boundaries comply with the requirements of local government certification under the National Historic Preservation Act, and the Secretary of the Interior standards for identification and registration, and CHAP's own criteria for designation. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Stacy?
Okay.
Okay, great. At this point, we want to give people the opportunity to give public comment. We have 4 individuals on the list. First, Johns Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Johns Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage. We have been speaking in favor of these buildings for 19 years. I don't think I have anything more to add. I signed up just in case there were any unusual things arise today, and so far nothing has. So thank you for your support.
Thank you. Ms. Nicole King.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Stacy, for that good presentation. Like John's, I signed up just to say that I've been reading the research that John's and others have done from almost 20 years ago, and I'm excited that this is moving forward, and it shouldn't have taken so long. I've just been a part of it for 2 years, and I just think that thank you to the CHAP commissioners, but I really think we need to think about how we represent this city and how we preserve its Black history. And again, it just shouldn't have taken this long, but I'm glad that we're going to move things forward today. So thank you for your time and for your service.
Thank you. Ms. Edie.
Thank you, everybody. Stacy, I really enjoy seeing this history. Every time I come here, it's like I learn more and I appreciate more. So thank you for that PowerPoint today. And I would like to thank this commission for hearing Poppleton's story, and to consider making this place where I live, my home, designated historical part of Poppleton. It's something that, being a Black person, to see what's available as far as history is concerned, because one thing is like we don't really look at homes and buildings and neighborhoods, as a historical place. But learning about CHAP and learning about what should be preserved, and living here and witnessing in 1975 the destruction of all of the homes to make way for the highway to nowhere. To witness that, and then to witness all of the destruction that began to happen, because looking at this in 1975 with the new urban renewal plan, and them not seeing a reason, to put any type of investment into this neighborhood. And I was sitting here and I was listening and I'm looking at, okay, why would they not consider any investment in this neighborhood when you tore down all of this, I mean, this whole swath of land, blocks and blocks and blocks of homes and businesses, and to bring a highway, to me, that would mean bringing improvements, to a community, but yet they saw it was not necessary and I'm looking at what was here, and that was, we had the Lexington Terrace projects, which was like 3 high-rise, 13-story project buildings and lower story buildings. We had the Edgar Allan Poe homes, which were projects at the time in 1975 as well. So all of the investment and improvements that I saw that they considered tearing out the houses to make way for the terraces and the Poe homes. And now what had become of them not deemed necessary to do any further investments. And so now to come and decide what's going on in the city and bringing improvements, Poppleton had to suffer again with the loss of all of the legacy homeowners and renters and business owners, and property owners in the neighborhood to make way now for some future development. And again, to keep suffering and loss, and so to have this opportunity to preserve and to protect something that reflects our identity to this neighborhood. I just appreciate y'all considering this and look forward to living in this district at 319. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. E. Commissioners, do we have any questions for any individuals who just finished speaking? Okay, well, if that's the case, what we have before us, the staff recommendation. Staff recommends approval of the determination that the proposed designation of Sarah Ann Street as a local historic district meets the requirements of Baltimore City Historic Preservation Rules and Regulations, the designation of district and landmarks. The designation includes a full and proper study with findings of fact that proposed district and boundaries comply with the requirements of local government certification under the National Historic Preservation Act, the Secretary of the Interior standards for identification, registration, and CHAP's own criteria for designation. I said that as fast as I could. So, do I have a motion to set that forward from anyone?
Move staff recommendation.
Thank you, sir. Do I have a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
There we go. Next, we have 3603 Sequoia Avenue in the Ashburton Historic District, and we also have 3605 Sequoia Avenue in the Ashburton Historic District. Our staff who will be sharing with us the information is Mr. Eddie Leon, and the applicant is Isaac Bekave.
Commissioners, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. We have for your consideration a return concept review to construct a 2-story single-family house at actually 2 sites by the same developer at 3603 Sequoia Avenue and 3605 Sequoia Avenue. First is 3603. I'll go through 3603 more thoroughly. It is almost identical in the information. The subtleties are in the physical elevations of each project. So we have the sites are located in the Ashburn neighborhood, a pair of empty lots at 3603 and 3605 Sequoia Avenue. This is the third return for the project. February 2022 CHAP hearing, commission tabled the vote on the concept review of the project until the developer could address issues concerning the construction of 3502 Cedar Dale, which we've discussed before. The commission made recommendations regarding the design and instructed the developer to work with the staff to make changes that would make the 2 proposals at 3603 and 05 more unique and compatible with the varied architecture styles in the community. We met again in June 2022 The commission disapproved the plans as presented and instructed the applicants to work with the Architectural Review Committee of the CHAP Commission to work with redesigning the proposal to better comply with the design guidelines. The applicants and his architect, Ms. Julie Tice, met with the members of the commission in July of 2022 and were given further guidance for redesigning the house, the proposals at both properties. The applicants proposed to construct a new two-story residence on an empty lot. The house is designed as a contemporary colonial revival with a hipped roof. CHAP staff applied guidelines to Chapter 2, specifically 2.1 and 2.2 site design, 2.3 scale and form, 2.4.5 roofs. So we have for your review the design proposal as revised by the applicant. The applicant is very similar to what was presented before, except for the finishing material. The previous iteration was of a stone finish with a colonial portico porch. The colonial portico porch steps have been modified and more detail has been added to it. The front windows are designed more in keeping with the historic styles of other buildings throughout the community. They've added a dormer with paired windows that also represents something that more conforms with what's found in the community. The applicants worked directly and took the cues and applied them as instructed by the Architectural Review Committee architects that were in attendance. This is the rear elevation, which is very, as you see in the smaller view, how it was previously, a very irregular pattern. The architect has now revised the plans and has added more uniformity to the fenestration pattern in the rear, similar to what you would find in other historic homes in the neighborhood. Site design remains the same. There will be a front driveway that comes up to the front edge of the house. The width of the lots are not ones that would allow driveways that would continue to around to the side or to the rear as in other homes in the area. The larger two side elevations show changes so that they are better as viewed from the principal street elevation, look more regular and unified in their presentation to the community. The smaller ones, you can see the irregular location and minimal window openings. So the scale and form continues to be the same as that of a colonial four-square building found surrounding the community. It is different slightly by half a story to what's immediately adjacent on both sides of the properties on Sequoia, but it's not too dissimilar from properties right around the corner. The applicants provided this rendering, which shows how the properties would be, give you an idea of the massing and scale of the site proposals. You can see both the 3603 and 3605 as they would be located on the site and in comparison to the other two buildings on the property. The applicants the proposal does meet the CHAP guidelines for new construction in terms of height, scale, and massing. The building meets setback requirements, design and material requirements, hardy plank wood door, metal-clad wood windows, and on the facade, we have allowed vinyl windows on the side and rear and composite trim elements. The Ashburn Architectural Review Committee were provided these plans for commentary. They have met And they did provide, just before this meeting, the following comments. Let me pass them around to you. To sum up briefly, there is agreement that there have been improvements to the overall designs as previously presented to the commission. However, there's still a strong sentiment in the community that they would like to see some uniqueness brought to each property a bit further than the hardy plank facade finish that was presented most recently. There are members of the committee here who would like to come and address the commission and provide you a bit more refinement and detail about those sentiments and maybe some ideas for cues that could be taken and used if the commission considers them appropriate to this. So, recommendation, concept approval of new construction as the plans meets the CHAP design guidelines for new construction, and staff recommends the final plans to return to the staff for review. Let me go quickly through 3605. I'll skip over most everything else as we've already covered. The background, the general proposal, the design of this particular building is again a hardy plank front facade. It includes a full porch that stretches across the front of the property in a wood frame. And as you can see from the previous iteration in the corner, there had been a proposal for brick finish on this particular building. Again, the rear elevation has been improved and is more symmetrical and fits better within the context of the community. Same with the side elevations, added windows and regularity help improve and take away from the blank slate that was there previously due to too much plain siding. And again, the context of the buildings as they would appear within this section of Sequoia. And finally, then again, same recommendation for 3605. Thank you, Commissioners.
Eddie, thank you, sir. Commissioners, I know the letter is still circulating. While it's circulating, do you all have any questions for Eddie?
Please go back to the slide of the 3603, the front new elevation.
Certainly.
Did you say we do have some folks who are going to?
Yes, a couple members of the committee are here to address their.
So we'll hold discussion until we hear from them? Okay.
But you're asking questions, you want us to ask questions?
Still, if there's any questions from the commission to Eddie. You have any questions for Eddie? Okay, good, okay.
I have a few.
Go right ahead, Paul, go right ahead.
Yes.
There was speak of the site condition. Like, is there a site plan provided?
There was a site plan provided in your packet on the Wix site, I believe.
And then another question I had, in terms of materiality, like, is there a lot of precedent for hardy panel on primary facades, hardy plank on primary facades?
In wood frame construction in suburban settings, yes, it has been done.
In the historic districts? In
the historic districts. I believe Mount Washington, perhaps in other of the single-family house outer ring neighborhoods. There have been at least a couple cases of it before us.
Okay.
Commissioner, any other questions for Eddie? Okay, we'll move right on to the public comment. I have two sheets. One sheet is for 3603, one sheet is for 3605. However, there are names on both sheets for both addresses. When you come to the podium, if you could address both addresses at the same time and for the essence of time. I'd first like to bring up Mr. Isaac. That's fine. Is that Ms. Julie?
Yes.
By all means. And please state your full name for the record.
Of course. Julie Tice with East End Design Group. I was the architect hired to help navigate these revisions through the final CHAP approval. So I'm sure you're painfully aware of this project by now after 3 visits to the board. We intended with these elevations to try to clean up the materials, clean up some of the proportion and finishes, and really give a better, what we think is a better product for new construction in this historic district. The original proposal did have a stone veneer on one of the houses and brick on the other. And you can see from the original window patterning that there was some incoherence to the original architectural elements proposed. The reason that we stepped away from the brick and the stone is these were originally proposed as just a front veneer, and the buildings are so visible from multiple directions because of how the neighborhood in that block is situated, and you can see that in the 3D massing models. So the concern is always when you do just these veneers, it starts to look very suburban, where you just have this kind of thin thing slapped on and there's no connection to the other facades. And what we felt was that the siding proposal would give an opportunity to have a quality material that was consistent around all 4 facades that would be visible from not only Sequoia, but any of the adjacent streets as well. So you get that total experiential total experience from all sides. As to the question of precedent in this community, I did put together a presentation for the architects on the commission that went into some context of the community. You can't really tell it from this little section of Sequoia, but the rest of Ashburton is filled with basically this 4-square model building, this 2-story 4-square with the gabled roof, and it has these variations already built into it of the colonial, the prairie style, and some Dutch revival and all kinds of things. But this 2-story box is probably a good 75% of the housing style that is in the immediate 5 or 6 blocks around it, including right around the corner. And then across the street are 2-story Spanish revival as well. So there's, what you see in this snapshot is the context of these 2 1-story stone homes, but those are unique unto themselves from the rest of the community of Ashburton. So that's what we were kind of approaching this as, filling in with something that meets the context of Ashburton and also can be compatible with the homes that are there.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for Ms. Julie?
I have a question. I'm sorry.
No, you please go.
Thank you. What's proposed for the foundation wall material for the 2 houses?
So the foundation will be cast concrete, but if there's a particular veneer material that you want to, if we want to do like a pressed brick pattern, or, I think we can talk, we haven't selected anything in particular for that foundation. I think we're open to different veneer treatments.
Commissioner Paul, go right.
I don't have a site plan in my packet, in our packet.
Agreed.
So I don't,
A proposed,
yeah.
can you talk a little bit about what's proposed for the site around the house?
Sure. So there's 10-foot setbacks, side setbacks on each property. If you're looking at the home to the right-hand side, which would be the west side on each property, is the proposed driveway, a 10-foot wide concrete driveway. And then there is a minor grade change from the sidewalk up to the pad site, somewhere in the vicinity of 18 inches. The other homes there do have like 2 or 3 steps up at that sidewalk. I know it's been requested that we include that, so we are proposing to include that as well, which isn't shown in the massing model. But there is, that's pretty much the site. And then the setbacks are lining up the building faces with the existing building faces.
Thank you.
So no curb cut? There will be a curb cut on each property, yeah, for the driveway. Because there's no back alley access, but there are curb cuts for the rest of this block as well, so it's consistent with.
So,
Oh, go right ahead.
okay,
Go
sorry.
ahead. It's okay.
I just kind of want to make sure, what? They have one.
over there.
So, because two of the comments from the community were about either an alley, loaded garage, or a driveway that extends from the road to the rear of the property. So you guys are considering the driveway option from the main street because there's not
There is
an
no alley.
opportunity for an alley in the
Correct.
rear. So you are looking at that to be consistent with the other
Yes, so
properties in
the
the area.
property on the corner, 3601, does have rear access because it is off of the street, but it's not from an alley. So the only way for us to park in the rear yard would be to continue the driveway, and
Okay.
I don't believe that the owner would have any objection to continuing the driveway back so
Okay.
that the cars aren't parked right up front.
All right.
There is no plan to build a garage, but I think continuing the driveway back past the front of the house line is perfectly fine.
Okay, thank you.
And I will say, I have not had a chance to see these comments from Ashburton, so I genuinely don't know what's in them until.
What's the procedure? Are they allowed to have a copy?
Sure.
Because I can just hand them this one.
Ask,
got
Tyree, can
one,
you make
Eddie?
some copies?
Okay, said he has another copy. Okay.
Do we have any more questions for Ms. Julie? Okay, Ms. Julie, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Isaac, would you like to speak?
I'll wait till.
I was just going down the list, so, okay. Next, we have a Larnett Campbell.
Lawrence Campbell.
Lawrence, I'm sorry.
What I'm going to do, I'm going to defer to Jerry Gaylord to speak first.
All right. Jerry Gaylord.
So I'd like to start with, we definitely appreciate the enhancements that they did, because they do add a lot to what basically looked like a box before. But one of the key things that we in the community notice, and as we look at it, like, for example, every community has their own unique main street, just like Hampton has 36th Street. Guilford has St. Paul Street. Roland Park has Roland Avenue. So when we look at our community, that's the same way we look at Sequoia, as that main street that goes through our community. So when you look at Sequoia, you do see homes that are unique just to Sequoia, in that they are a little more upscale than maybe some of the homes on the side street. And there's some consistency also in the homes, just like how she stated on the opposite side of the 3600 block of Sequoia. All the homes are Spanish style, all of them, not one here, one different, or something like that. If you go one block to the 3500 block, again, these are all brick style homes and a combination of brick, stone, and some with siding. But you're seeing that consistency on Sequoia. And if you go to the 33 and 3400 block, again, you see it's all brick style, or you'll see where on the opposite side, which one used to be former Mayor Kurt Smoke, his home was a brick style, one level, and then the home itself was a combination of a wood, stone, and I think it was just wood and stone. And then the house on the corner was a two-door style. But if you look at Sequoia, you see the uniqueness in that when they did go into design, they tried to keep some consistency in the materials as well as in the different styles. Just like the one block before, again, it's all stone homes, like stones on this side, stone is unique, different, but they use the same material for each block. And that was one of the key things when we came in June. We were trying to say, okay, if we have to go with those styles that they presented to us, that we at least wanted to try to have some consistency in the two homes they were building in the sense of the materials that were consistent with that whole Sequoia area. And that's what we're still grappling with from the perspective that the homes that are currently presented, the enhancement is a lot better. We appreciate that. But then there's still wheres we're not seeing some of the things that initially in June that we thought we were going to still get. And I do have some, if I could pass these around, some of the homes that are on Sequoia or on some of the side streets that are similar to the styles of these homes, but show the combination of the stone, the brick, and in some cases the siding. So if I could, okay.
That's fine.
And that's one of the key things we're still, from a community perspective, still would like to see if possible. For 3603, everything about that home now looks more presentable to what you're seeing on Sequoia. The only thing that we're not seeing any type of stone, which it's where's the hardy plank on the front, it just still doesn't give it that presentation that we're expecting of a home on Sequoia. So if there's a way where they can enhance it somehow with a stone around the windows or around the door, we would appreciate it. Because as far as it looks now, it's more presentable of how we expect a home to look on Sequoia. It's just that it's still missing that one element the community would like to see in that home at 3603.
Okay, thank you. We're going to make sure your phone gets back to you, too.
Okay.
All right.
And like I said, as you see those homes, you'll see where you do see the combination of the stone, the brick, and in some cases, the siding as well. So it's not that we're so much not appreciative of it, but it's just that the front of the home, if you could add some of that element to it, not saying the whole front as what initially was presented, all brick or all stone, but if it could be enhanced with that, we would appreciate it at 3603.
Go right ahead.
So this is Commissioner Powell. I have a question. So I think that I was here, I'm a longer-term commissioner, so I've been with this project for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there is this tension between the materials that Sequoia has in the houses that are on Sequoia and the financial constraints that are currently present. Couple that with the fact that there are obvious precedents of wood siding in other parts of the neighborhood. Totally understand that's not on Sequoia.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's this tension between that and the idea of using upgraded material on a single face is really challenging to us, and there's no precedent of that really that I can find in the neighborhood. So would it work, do you think, but I also hear what you're saying about that masonry element that needs to kind of come through to elevate the houses and make them feel more consistent with the level of detail that's on Sequoia. So what if, everything that's kind of below the first floor, what if that was stone veneered, and the steps were stone veneered, which is common on the other wood framed houses?
And there's actually one in there like that.
Yeah.
There's a home actually like that in there.
And on the other house that has the front porch on it, perhaps that stone could come up to the handrail height, which is something that's commonly done.
Yeah, and there's actually a home in there that actually it came before became before us, and they did add the tan house where it has the hardy plank and the stone in the lower level.
Yeah, I can hear you.
I agree with Commissioner Powell. That's what I was thinking and why I asked the question about what was proposed under that level, because as we've talked about before.
Thank you, I could not find it. Yeah, well, I was thinking like this. Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, well, no, feel free to.
Like this.
Another limitation, not just the financial considerations of the material cost, but the sizes of the lots and therefore the size of the house makes it hard to have multiple materials in a mass that's going to still look, I think, compatible with the neighborhood.
Right.
And so, I hear your concern certainly about wanting to maintain a certain stateliness to Sequoia. And I think if you look at the massing model, the one that just shows the size of the house relative to the ones on the other sides, that it's
Right.
promising that these houses would not look like they were too small, for example. And so I think that the foundation zone of the wall is the best bet for incorporating this masonry that could tie it into the rest of the neighborhood. But, I think several of us have asked about the site plan, and one reason I'm concerned about the notion of there being a curb cut and a driveway that goes up to the front of the house and stops. I see that there isn't space to go behind the house, but I think that the way that would actually look would detract from the quality of those lots more so than street parking. Ms. Tice seems to want to respond to that. I don't know if that is permitted or how we can.
By all means, come back up, Ms. Jones.
We still have a couple other folks that need to testify too.
Yeah, we do,
I
we
just
do.
want to
Which I'm
clarify
about to,
that
for Sarah,
the
to
driveway
clarify.
is in the side yard, so it's not lined up with the house. It's to the side and would run past the house. So there's a 10-foot side yard setback between the property line and the house, and that's where the driveway.
Where does the driveway stop
Well, that's what
relative
we were
to the
saying.
house
The
and the
driveway
street?
could continue.
Ms. Julie, come
past
closer to the
front-
mic, come closer to the mic.
I'm sorry, the driveway could continue past the front building line into either, to the backyard. I mean, we can discuss where it stops, but it doesn't have to stop at the
Okay,
front
so there is,
building.
okay, all right.
And so it's not
Thank you for
lined up. Yeah, I just
clarifying
want to
that.
clarify that it is jammed all the way over to the west lot line.
Okay.
And then would run past the house.
Okay.
Would it be similar to the conditions that you see there now across
Yes.
the street?
Exactly. It would, so the bottom row of houses are the Spanish colonials on the bottom, so it would be much like that, where you'd see the concrete just ride right past the front.
And you're
Thank
also
you.
providing a pedestrian way as well?
Yes, there is a sidewalk that would run from the.
Not a sidewalk, but a
front walk.
A front, yes,
From the
there'd be a front
sidewalk.
path from the sidewalk up to the porch or the portico.
Which presumably would have a little run of steps with handrails, right?
Right,
Because
well,
that would
she
be a
already
great
stated
change.
there's 18 inches, about 18 inches.
Yeah,
of
I mean, I
change.
think it's a little different for each one. I think it's 12 on one and 18 on the other. So it'd be like between 2 and 3 steps right there to make that transition to the pad site.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Gaylord, you have your phone back?
Yes.
Okay, is there anything else you'd like to share?
Okay, so if I understand, you're saying that we're for 3603 and 3605, you're talking about having a concrete element? Is that what I hear, possible proposal?
We
Stone.
haven't gone fully to discussion yet, so I think
We
we're
haven't.
probably still going to talk about that a little bit more.
Okay.
So we'll get to that in a minute.
Okay, because the one thing that originally that for 3605, it was a stone porch. It was a porch, and now they have like that lattice, and the community is like, you don't see that. And that's when we were wondering why that changed. Yeah, that was the only other thing.
Ms. Gay, thank you.
All right.
Mr. Campbell, you want to speak? Okay.
Commissioner, Mikes, and to this great body, thank you for having time to speak. Let me do two things. Number one, I disagree with the whole thing. However, the committee, the CHAP committee, has come away with a response that says, and I'd like to read it into the record, because my concern was that we should take both houses and put them together and make them one house. Because in order to keep the Ashburton picture on for Sequoia is to have enough space on each side of the houses to be able to have the property to look great. But that was my position. The CHAP committee says the following: to the Baltimore Zoning Commission, in a meeting on September 12, 2022, we reviewed the developer proposals and concluded the following. Overall, we are pleased with the more recent proposals for construction of Sequoia Avenue. The two designs feature many characteristics of original homes in Ashburton, which certainly pushes us closer to achieving our goal, development of plans for well-built dwellings that meet requirements for historic communities in Baltimore City and that include elements of Ashburton charm. While the revised plans presented by Dream House LLC are much improved from the initial plans, there are still some elements left desired. By and large, homes in Ashburton, particularly on main thoroughfares such as Sequoia Avenue, Hilton Road, Callaway Avenue, and Liberty Heights Avenue, are very large and stately. Many of the homes in these thoroughfares are constructed of brick, stone, and/or stucco, and many, especially on Sequoia Avenue, stand on double lots. With the exception of 2-3 out of 881 single-family homes in Ashburton, all houses are either 1, driveways that extend from the road to the rear of the property, or 2, an alley, load, garage, or driveway. These features are important to Ashburton because it creates an atmosphere that is free of congestion created by the sight of excessive vehicles. On Sequoia Avenue between Hilton Road and Callaway Avenue, very few cars are ever seen from the roadway compared to many other communities in the city. The absence of vehicles allows the eyes to focus more on the architecture of our homes and mature tree canopies. Ashburton is not Ashburton just by happenstance. Ashburton is Ashburton because thought and investments are made into designing and maintaining a community of good quality. We're asking for your support in ensuring that the houses constructed on Sequoia Avenue are of good quality. Our association supports the designs presented by Dream House, but we want better quality materials and features. For example, in a proposal for a house that features a front porch at 3605 that spans across the entire front, we would prefer that the foundation of the porch is encased with brick, stone, or stucco, similar to the houses that currently exist on that particular block. We would like for the houses to include shutters to align with the design of other homes in Ashburton constructed with siding.
Excuse me, Mr. Campbell, I just want to ask you, this isn't the same letter that we just
It's
finished?
the same letter, but I need to have the importance of what the community wants in this last paragraph here, and I'll be finished.
Okay.
May I do that, sir?
Yes, you may.
Okay, thank you. Okay? We would like to have the driveways for these houses to extend from the road to the rear of the properties, allowing residents to park vehicles out of sight from the driveway. We would prefer at least one of the houses have a brick stone facade, at least covering the front side of the first story. Ashburton is delighted to have new development in our community, but not at the cost of quality. We recently invited the public to attend a tour around our community, and visitors pointed out Butler Stone and described its history and construction. Others admired the intricate detailing of brick masonry on houses. We want the houses that Dream House LLC plans to construct to measure up to those that currently exist and hold historical significance, not just in Ashburton, but in Baltimore City. Again, the new designs are near to our satisfaction, but much is left desired in terms of materials and features. We're asking the commission to support in ensuring that these designs are improved. Arnold Foster, President, Ashburton Neighborhood Association.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell.
Thank you.
Commissioners, do you have any questions? Okay. And if you could you take us back to the page before we deliberate?
Did
Key further
Isaac want
recommendations?
to?
Hold on 1 second. Thank you. Finally, Isaac, would you like to speak now?
Yeah, that's fine. I have a question for Isaac.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
First of all, good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see everybody. Please.
Just the letter that was passed around, I mean, read, there's some specific things that the community is, I would say, I wouldn't, we use the word requesting, but there's things that they are recommending. Are you opposed to any of that in terms of providing those to the project?
Well, first of all,
reasonable.
Just for the record, okay, we've reached, both my architect and myself reached out several times, and just seeing this letter here now, I'm a little bit taken back. I don't even know how to respond in the moment. I got to think about it. I don't know. I'm just seeing this. I can't just, we've had a meeting before that with architects. We had a Zoom call meeting, make sure we were all lined up with what we're proposing. I have to think about it. I can't give you an answer, I'm sorry.
One thing that you are already planning is the driveway. You were talking about that earlier. That driveway is already, as they're actually requesting, is how you're planning it. Is that correct?
Say that again?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just-
Yeah, that's what they said earlier.
I think she said it could be extended to the back.
But they're already planning a driveway. We don't have a proposed site plan, so.
I know.
But the way that.
Maybe let her answer.
So hold on, first of all, who's we? So is it you or the we? Am I correct? So that will let you answer the question that Commissioner Poe just asked.
If I recall, the driveways would stop from the beginning of the street, go all the way to the front of the house. That's,
Request us to extend it back.
Back.
You're saying that it's possible, but you haven't actually agreed to do that yet. That's how I understand it.
that's correct.
Okay.
To Julie's, to your point earlier, it's possible.
Well, so what, the site plan was developed by the architect of record for these. So I'm here as a consultant, a facade consultant. The site plans that were prepared from the very beginning show a driveway at the western edge of the lot and going up to, I honestly can't remember if it goes past the building line or if it just goes up, but it was all the way to the side and certainly could be extended past the front building line at any depth. That's just a little bit of extra concrete. So there was no intention to line the driveway up to center it with the building. It was always intended to be jammed all the way to one side. So the request to have that continued back past the front building line is perfectly reasonable. That is a perfectly doable thing to make sure that that happens.
I'll just say this. I was expecting to see after the last presentation, at least the final renderings based on community engagement, what we've heard today and what you expressed. I'm just sharing just my opinion. I was hoping to see that. As we're talking, I hear you all saying, we will do this, we can do this. And so I'm just trying to figure out what type of timetable or what type of information will you give the commission that allows us, not even just the commission, but the staff. So I'm just trying to gauge that.
So unfortunately, we made multiple attempts to try to reach out to Ashburton to meet with their design review committee to try to discuss the changes that came out of the architectural review committee dialogue with the commission. And never got a response from them, not even an acknowledgement of receipt of any email. I asked Eddie to follow up. He never got anywhere with them. And then we were suddenly asked to join an in-person meeting the same day at 6 or 6:30 that evening, which was not possible for me. However, I said, I'm happy to be on call on my phone if you have any questions, if you have any feedback. I did not get any correspondence from them that evening. I did not get any follow-up correspondence from them. Eddie said that he followed up with them to try to get comments out of that meeting, and nothing was forthcoming until this was dropped in everybody's lap today.
So Eddie just stood up. I didn't want to cut you off. I'll give him an opportunity to speak as well.
Commissioners, I can verify the applicants were honest, trying to communicate with Ashburton. As I later learned, and right before the day that we were discussing a possible inclusion in a Zoom call, I learned the chairman had been on vacation. So there was a lag in catching up with the attempts to reach Ashburton to be scheduled to be reviewed by them. There was an impromptu discussion, and I recall that there was going to be plans to try to meet. It was about a couple weeks ago. I still hadn't heard anything, so that's when I communicated again most recently, and the committee did meet last night. So it's part of the summer vacations conflicting with the availability to meet. So that is why there this discourse of getting comments back for the applicants to respond to or to agree to or have thought of how to answer. So
Eddie, thank you for the clarity.
Sure.
Hold on one second.
But I do want, just in addressing this, so I want to go through each of these items because we did, when we were discussing with the commission, the mini committee with the commission, some of these questions that came up.
Now,
So-
Julie, I will say in the essence of time, it isn't something you've already mentioned before, is it? Or
I was going to bring some of our discussion up
Okay.
during our discussion.
Okay, that's fine. So I just want you to know, we have not been trying to hide from Ashburton. We have tried, and I understand that there's miscommunications that happen.
I just wanted to ask the question. That's all.
Sure.
All right.
I just don't want you to think that we've been ducking any discussion.
Understood. Commissioners?
So discussion? Okay. Did you want to say something, Dr. Howell?
Yeah, it just seems like that the discussion is not finished at that level. That's what it seems like to me. There's been some miscommunication and some additional information, and so I don't feel empowered to make a decision at this point because there's discussion on both sides. There may even be no issue. I just can't tell yet.
So
Commissioner Garrett, thank you, sir. Go ahead, Catherine.
I do just want to note that we're at a concept review level. I think that the applicant has made a great deal of effort to develop the design. That said, we can of course still have comments, but we also have wherever we get to with a motion, we do have review that can still happen at the staff level. So even though, every little nth degree may not be decided, that's not something that typically is required to be decided when we vote on that. We leave that to staff coordination. So, that said, I just encourage everyone to keep in mind that if there's something fundamentally that we want to make sure is explored or incorporated, that we can incorporate that into our motion. It doesn't have to be completely figured out today.
Understood. Any other commissioners? Go right ahead, Kate.
I have a question. I believe that we could also recommend that it come to the commission for final review if we wanted to. So if people were more comfortable with it coming back, no. Or not.
So
I'm just putting that out there. It could go to staff review, or we could, if that's an option.
I guess the other thing is, and I don't know if Sarah and Ann have anything they want to say, we did have a kind of in-between meeting where we looked at several items. I do wish that that package that showed examples of other addresses and photos and those sorts of things were submitted as part of this, because I don't think the whole commission has seen that. I don't remember if it was sent to everybody or not. Do you recall, Liam? Or
I
Eddie?
don't recall exactly. It
Okay.
may have been very early on. But
It
this
was-
was
Okay.
It
back-
was not, but it doesn't.
Personally, I found that very helpful. And then also, thank you for providing those few examples today on your cell phone. I think at least when I hear everything, I feel like we're really close, that there are a few items that the community is passionate about, but overall, we're very close. As the commission has more discussions about how do we make this process easier and more accessible and, not take an egregious amount of time, I'm seeing a project like this right here. And so in my personal opinion, I think if we can come up with a motion that allows our capable staff to finish up the details rather than delaying another month would be prudent. That's my personal opinion.
I mean, and
go
you've
right
been
ahead.
here much longer. Yeah, you probably were here for all three, right? I was only here for two. Initially, I was thinking, when it was the materiality that was kind of holding me up, but then if there's a precedent of this, and then I'm not really held up to that. And I would think that on face value, that most of the stuff could be handled at staff level for articulation, materiality, detailing, and final specification, all that kind of stuff that you typically have done in the past. And this would just be kind of concept design massing approval, right? But I've never seen, I don't know if you've seen a site plan before, But I haven't seen one, and the only reason why I'm making a big deal out of that is that there is two houses that typically might be on, somewhat proportionally on one lot. There's this idea about trying to create a driveway that has to find its place onto that site. And there's just incomplete information, in my opinion. Like, we can't, whenever we, my understanding is when you present a project with materials to present that project in visualization, you kind of, if you want to come out of here with one trip, you got to have that whole package, right? So that means that it's a proper site plan for both properties in the context of the entire sort of block, right? A three-dimensional model that's more detailed than what we had seen, that shows more detail about how these properties are going to sit within those lots in relation to the other properties, and also in relation to the site development, because this is two new houses in this very historic neighborhood. And if that site plan doesn't work, and if the massing of these two buildings sitting in that site doesn't work, then, you can't judge on the massing, right? Because the massing may have to squeeze, the buildings may have to change, you might have to get skinnier, right? I mean, I would, if we would all say, hey, massing is fine, and this is concept design, and they'll take care of the articulation, details, whatever, at staff level, I would have been fine with it. But I've just never seen how these buildings truly sit on this site, and that I can't judge on the final concept massing, if I was gonna say that, and leave the staff to details when the massing, in my opinion, is still in the air.
I apologize that it did not appear in this latest iteration of the package presented by the applicants. The same site plan has always been the same site plan as the previous two commission hearings that they presented and provided the site plan at.
Are we able to pull that up?
I believe it's been deleted from the Wix site.
It has, I was looking for it.
But I could send it to the commission as a whole this evening. I have copies of that
I have
elsewhere.
I have a question. I mean, do you think that, Kapal, do you think you could frame a motion that did a certain amount of approval/direction contingent upon the return with the site plan so that we can move it along but not overcommit?
I think that's fine. I mean,
Have
like,
that in your head?
yeah, I think so. I think, because, I mean, it has been 3 times, dragging this
Yeah,
project along.
I'd like
I'm
to
sure.
move forward.
I mean, this is, only my second time on this project.
And too many cooks in the kitchen. I mean, we can always sit here and redesign everything, but, that's not our role. Our role is
Oh, don't
to-
get me wrong, I'm not trying to design the project. I just want clarity on how this project sits on this site, so then the community can also be standing behind it.
Yeah, perhaps what we might do is consider providing a list of the things that should be depicted in the rendering.
In the final rendering.
So that because what's been presented in 3 dimensions right now is very minimal. It doesn't show anything about where the driveways are, what the driveways look like in the adjacent properties, for example. And that does make it hard to see it all together. So maybe if we list what we want to, what should be seen together, that'll help both us and the community visualize it more accurately.
The applicants have also indicated to me just now that they are willing to work with putting a stone bases and front porch elements back into these designs. So it will hopefully meet some of the aspects of that the community is wishing.
So I do just want to respond to one comment from the community where they suggest shutters. I think some of us have had this conversation. I don't feel that it's historically appropriate to add shutters to the style that's being proposed, and also as it's new construction. And then most of the houses on Sequoia being of course, a different style with the kind of Mediterranean Spanish feel. They do not have shutters. So I feel that this would not be an appropriate location for shutters. But the other points about the driveway extension that we've talked about, site plan with looking at both the driveway or, a stair, a couple stairs to get through that elevation change, and then considering some brick, stone or stucco or something like that, incorporating into the porch and the foundation line. Does that address, did I miss anything in the community's concerns?
From the perspective, if there's some way they could add some element.
Come forward, sir. So we get you on the mic.
If they could add some element to the hardy plank, even around the windows or doors, we would appreciate that too, if somehow, if it's able to.
That, to just kind of do a border of stucco or masonry or stone around the windows, for example.
Like I said,
I personally, I don't feel like
Well, it
that's
could be more
consistent
trim.
with-
It does- I mean,
Yeah,
not
I don't
masonry.
think
It's
it's consistent with the styling, but porch, foundation, those kinds of elements, I agree with Sarah that those would help
if
tie
it was,
it in.
if it was anything more than there's presented now, I think that it's stone at the foundation level and then perhaps some more hardy trim around the openings. But as I said earlier, it's tough to
Right.
find a
And that's what
place to
I'm
put,
saying.
other than the foundation wall, which
Right.
is natural and kind of makes sense. It's hard to find a place to put brick or masonry that looks appropriate.
Well, I've seen a couple homes where they just have it around the door. That's where.
Right,
Yeah,
and while that does happen,
Mhm.
that doesn't mean it should.
Okay. No, that's what I'm saying. I've seen some. That's one thing. But like I said, again, based on where it is now, it's definitely an improvement. We appreciate you guys working with them to get it there.
While you're here, can I ask a question?
Go ahead, go right ahead.
It sounds like there's a lot of amendable things that you can work with the developer or the builder in the next session. One more session, it sounds like, maybe, that final details and everything could be finalized with the staff, and there could be some balance here.
And the main reason why, when Eddie explained to us that you guys were in the process of redoing it, we stepped back, but we felt that based on the last discussion, certain things that we did want, as far as the facade, the things that we talked about in June's meeting, we thought they were going to be incorporated. But as far as when they were meeting with you guys, we said, well, we're going to leave it to you guys because you guys have a lot more knowledge. And that's why we stepped back and said, let them handle it.
If there was development in the design after our last
Right.
meeting too, so they took several comments and incorporated and looked at those. So this is a little bit different than what we've seen before, because they were working to incorporate some other comments. So I just want to make that clear that, they were continuing to respond to comments.
Right. Okay.
And for the record, it was a review, not a redesign. We
Oh,
were
no,
reviewing-
I
yeah.
mean, no.
I know what you mean, I'm just
Right,
for
right.
clarity.
Not you guys, but
Right.
taking your lead and based on your knowledge and enhancing.
Thank you, Mr. Gaylord.
All right, thank you.
So,
Go, you have more.
yeah, so, compound, I'm trying to see if I can kind of summarize everything, so tell me if I say this right. So your concern mainly is with wanting to see an updated site plan to see how the house is located on the lots. We, of course, can't, it's not under our purview to say, oh, take both properties and combine them and make one big house. We can't dictate that. But to be able to show the setbacks and update with exploring how the driveway extends or the extent of the driveway and the pedestrian path up to the house with stairs or not stairs, and then how that relates to the houses around it. And then, did I hear that everybody would like to see a more polished kind of rendering? Or is that something people feel like they need?
I didn't mean polished, I meant level of detail represented, and it works with the site plan, so it's.
Could be an elevation even.
It could be, it could be plan and elevation, but a little more understanding of how the houses, and I think the driveways now, are fitting onto the lot and fitting onto the block, because that won't let us evaluate.
Right,
what
so that
is-
could be conveyed through site plan and elevations.
Correct.
There's also the list, right? The checklist that has the things that should be submitted. And it's everything that we've kind of talked about.
Yeah, which I don't think we should.
Well, they did submit a site plan at a previous hearing, so it's not that they
But it's
haven't given
changed.
us
If
one.
the site is, if the site.
That's
plan
right,
is
it should,
changed,
yeah, it's been updated, so we want to see the latest.
See an updated site plan.
I agree, we should. I think some of those changes were just discussed today that the owner is willing to look at. So do you feel like you can frame a motion?
Well, hold on, what we have, before we frame the motion, Eric wrote down a lot of stuff while all of us were talking. So I want to give him an opportunity to go through his bullets, and then, Commissioner Poview, if there's some things on here that we need to add or take out, you let us know. And as a group, we can all come together and see if we have to take something out or put something in. So Eric, go right ahead.
So this is in the spirit of Commissioner Powell's wanting to move them forward and give us the leeway to make sure it's the best plan possible. And so I have, to start out with, approved just general concept of the plan with the applicant to return to the full commission with the following. And right now I have two things. One would be an updated site plan to provide setbacks and show the revised driveway.
And the pedestrian should be in the full, it should be like that full side of the street. A full sidewalk, driveways, property lines, setbacks, building footprints.
So a site plan for the whole street.
The block.
The block.
That block, including where the driveways are located on the other existing properties.
All right.
And that could be copy paste. It doesn't have to be all fully surveyed, we're not asking for that level.
Right, I mean, it could be, have like a satellite image on the background or something, for example.
And we would also like to have the applicant come back with revisions to include masonry on the basement level and also the porch level.
I think we need to give them the flexibility to look at stone, brick, or stucco, which are all materials found on Sequoia. Any other thoughts?
I would just say incorporate stone veneer on the foundations of both houses, because that's what's more typical in the wood frame vocabulary on the other properties on other streets.
Agreed.
I agree.
Okay.
And then, the idea there is perhaps that on the porch, perhaps it comes up a little bit, that's all to be explored, but I mean, that's how you get kind of more of that anchoring of wood framed house in the site, which giving it more prominence, which I think is the tension here.
Okay. And then we could put something in here that says, prior to returning to full commission, meet with the community again.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Or a good faith effort to make
Good
the
faith
community
effort, okay.
community? Well, I mean, if for some reason it doesn't work out for schedule and everything, yeah, then we end up.
Well, I guess my concern is, and I feel for the applicant in this, is it's very hard to navigate when you're, and Capel, you have much more experience being on the ARC side of the equation, which is not a seat I've sat in, but you get conflicting, you're looking to get a certain buy-in, but you also get conflicting opinions. And so, that's where it gets a little tense for me. I'm not sure what to say about that.
Yeah, I mean,
If they could go and they could get direction that's counter to what.
I feel like we
discussion.
have a good summary of the community's comments here.
Okay.
And we've talked about how to address them. We might disagree with a couple as far as, requiring maybe a garage or, requiring shutters. But I think all in all, that we are asking and what we're asking for will look at addressing most of these community comments. So I would be concerned about the same thing.
And just to be clear with the commission, our procedures require that staff and applicants, especially in major projects, try to obtain comments from the architecture review committees, not necessarily obtain their permission or necessarily attain consensus from them, but really to try to get those comments. And what you just said is that I think we do have them.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to add?
I think, anything else?
Can you reread that then, please?
Concept approval with return to full commission with
Final.
following comments, site plan with block context, incorporate stone veneer on foundations of both houses.
That's what I have that.
I kind of, I'm a little paragraph just like that. Okay.
Commissioners, I believe this should be stated as a motion per property, since these are two separate presentations.
Eddie, thank you. So let's do this. And what I will do is this. I'm going to give the address of the first property, and by all means, make that motion for the first property. We can vote on that as commission. Then I'll do the second property per Eddie's recommendation. 3603 Sequoia Avenue, Ashburton Historic District. The proposal, updated concept, construct two-story single-family house with the recommendations to
Concept approval with return to the full commission with the following comments. Site plan with the block context and incorporate stone veneer on the foundations of both houses.
Thank you.
Oh, of the house.
Of the house, yes, 3603. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, commissioners. 3605 Sequoia Avenue, Ashburton Historic District, proposal, update concept review, construct two-story single-family house with the recommendations to
Concept approval with return to the full commission with the following comments. Site plan with the block context and incorporate stone veneer on the foundations of the house and porch.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Commissioners, thank you. Thank you, Eddie. Welcome. Finally, we have 500 South Bond Street, Fells Point Historic District. Eddie will also be giving his presentation for us. And the applicant is Chasen Development. Justin Seto is the architect and is for the concept review, construct one-story rooftop addition. I'm just gonna have to wait for Eddie. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen, we have for your consideration to construct a one-story addition at 500 South Bond Street in the Fells Point Historic District by the architect Justin Seto, applicant Chasen Development. The site is located here at the southwest corner of the intersection of Eastern Avenue and Bond Street. The property is located next to a site that the commission has previously reviewed at 1517 Eastern Avenue. The building is this, if I can get this working. Quite kind of fast, sorry. A warehouse building at the corner intersection with two buildings that were incorporated into the warehouse structure on the south side. We see from the north the current lot that is being constructed on. This is also being developed by Chasen Development. The building on the left is the warehouse building. It will be continue as a warehouse and will be incorporated. They will incorporate a one-story addition that goes from the front of the property to the continuation of where the facade of the current South Bond Street elevation continues, and we'll have the second story the top story converted into residential properties as well. Here we have a view from the east looking at the building here. As you see, the building's facade, where the Chase & Company building signage is, extends over. There's a garage front on the side. The building was built after the period of significance for the historic district, and it was originally a empty lot for most of its existence until the period of significance. So there is no real historic structures that were located on the portion that's the warehouse. There are the two buildings adjacent to the south, which are properties along South Bond Street. They had lost their facades and been incorporated into this building that Chase & Company has now purchased and owns. They did not do any of the work to remove that historic front. That was by previous owners. The view here is from the south. We see to the left Dallas Street and to the right South Bond Street. Dallas Street is a alley, and as you can see, there is no rear property access, no rear alley or walking alley in this particular site. And this is the view from the west. We see a bit more of Bond Street and various different elevations of structures, including a 5-story building on the right top corner. But these are, for the most part, 3-story high row homes. Previously, the property had only been reviewed for signage by the CHAP staff, I believe in 2020. The applicant proposes to construct a 1-story residential addition, a 2-story non-contributing warehouse building. The proposed addition will have regular rows of windows on both the north and east elevations. The new floor will not be set back on both the Eastern Avenue and South Bond Street elevations. The buildings will have a flat roof. CHAP applied the following sections of the Baltimore City Preservation Guidelines: 1.17 alterations and additions, 2.1 guiding principles for new design, 2.2 site design, 2.3 scale and form. As we see from street level, the warehouse building has very tall garage openings and regular sized doorway openings at ground level. The proposal right now is just to explore whether fitting a 1-story addition to the current mass of this building. This is the view as we see it down on Bond Street, and the remaining 2 buildings that were incorporated into the larger warehouse building facade structure as one singular structure. Internally, I have not been in there, so I do not know where party walls or anything exist. There is a shared party wall with the first row home that's directly to the south. I believe Ms. Tempera, the owner, is here. She owns that particular building. We looked at 2.1 guiding principles for new design. There will be no demolition of existing historic buildings. 2 individual warehouse buildings located on the south portion of the site were incorporated to the warehouse building before the creation of the historic district, and their historic integrity was severely diminished as a result. The applicants plan to explore design elements that will help activate the pedestrian level of the warehouse. The building itself is already contemporary in design, will be enhanced with the addition of other elements into overall design that is more compatible with the surrounding historic district. This is a very early concept study of a 1-story block space on top of the roof. The applicants have agreed to come back to working with planning staff, UDAP staff, LUD staff, CHAP staff to further enhance and perhaps make a more presentable ground level experience for pedestrians. So this is the looking toward the southeast. This is the corner at Bond is toward the left, and to the right is Eastern Avenue. The structure next to it is the one that has previously been reviewed by the commission. That's 1517 Eastern Avenue. It is 5 stories tall. The proposed addition on the 500 South Bond Street is a one-story addition that will be built up to the corner edge line of the intersection and only go up to the 4th floor level of the new adjacent construction. Site design. The proposed addition is a non-historic warehouse that lacks any significant architectural details. The addition will clearly be adding to the prominent corner site of the intersection of South Bond Street and Eastern Avenue. 2.3 scale and form. The scale and form of the addition will follow that of the existing warehouse. The mass of the addition is a simple one-story block. Fenestration patterns have yet to be determined at this time by the design team. The planned height will match that of the project being built at 1517 Eastern Avenue on the 4th floor. The roof will be flat like the new project next door and the historic buildings along the east side of South Bond Street. Looking again on Eastern Avenue, we see where the applicants wish to bring their top floor line of the new addition, and it would be lined up with 1517 Eastern Avenue. The two properties will be separately entered, so they're not really a connecting or continuation of each other. The addition will help strengthen the corner of South Bond Street and Eastern Avenue. Applicants are requesting only the review of the volume of the proposed addition to their warehouse building. The basic height, massing, and scale of the addition meets the guidelines and does not overwhelm or adversely affect the surrounding historic buildings, which are mostly 3 stories high. Staff and the applicants have discussed approaches that will help activate the pedestrian experience along the ground floor. The applicants have agreed to work with staff before making their next presentation to the community and the commission. These are some renderings that show the current elevations on Eastern Avenue at the top with the proposed and under construction 1517 Eastern Avenue, and showing how the one-story addition would appear from the north on Eastern Avenue. Below is how the one-story addition would appear as stretched out across the property on Bond Street side and in comparison to the adjacent properties on Bond Street. As you see, there is a slight difference in height, but not an overwhelming difference in height. The Fells Point Design Review Committee reviewed the addition for height, massing, and scale. The committee approved the building massing and height only, but did not approve any specifics on the design presented. As I said, this is a very early concept working, and they're exploring if it can be built. Recommendation, approval, height and massing and scale, concept design to return to the full commission. So once the applicants have worked out more detailed plans for overall designs, they'll be returning fully back to the commission and presented to the community, of course. Thank you.
Eddie, thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Eddie?
I have a question. So the property next door was previously approved at some point way
Yes.
back when. So
Within the last year.
Okay, so the idea with not having it setbacks and facade is to stay basically consistent. It
With-
looks like the design for the building next door
Correct.
is the same way.
Correct. This is also a prominent corner, and the philosophy in the department has been trying to bring some hierarchy, prominence at the corners, and then scale down into the different sites. In this case, they would scale down. The corner at Bond and Eastern would be the high point, and then you have the lower variations of height within the rest of Bond Street.
Okay, thank you.
If I can, I've also add, this came to me late as well. I apologize. This is the letter of support from the Douglas District. If I can read it into the record briefly, they support the concept of mass, scale, and height for the proposed project. The Chase & Company met with the group citizens twice in the past 45 days. They requested additional renderings of Bond and Chase Street. And Chasen met with the neighbors directly impacted by the project. Chasen's complied with our requests, and support was offered to the concept for scale, height, and massing in nearly all the attendance after the second meeting at 17 in favor with one abstention. Although we offered support for the concept at this stage, we sternly ask that the additional work be done to clearly define the property lines in the rear of the building. Presently, there's confusion that the project plans be shared, discussed, and agreed upon by the neighbors directly impacted by the construction of the final building. In particular, 507 South Dallas Street, 2 condos, and in particular, we want clarity on the measures for safety during construction and future integrity of the adjacent properties. The Douglas District is working to create the most vibrant, inclusive, walkable, healthy, economically viable neighborhood in Baltimore City. So the questions about some of the lot lines and the location are, Chasen is working currently to get proper surveys to know where lines and property lines are, and whether there's been any movement of structures or walls in the current 200-300 years. This is from the Douglas District, is the immediate sub-neighborhood in Fells Point that is affected by the property.
Any question?
Just to confirm for record,
Yes.
both the ARC and the Douglas District have recommended approval for
Correct.
massing scale proportion only?
Yep.
And that it would return
absolutely
to full commission for details and more articulated design?
Absolutely.
Okay, understood.
Any other questions for Eddie?
Did you say that the warehouse building itself is not contributing to the district because it was built after the period of significance?
Correct, and the 2 buildings that are attached, incorporated within the building, we feel lost integrity well before the creation of the district, and we don't even know the conditions inside of, the facade certainly has been lost completely, and so.
Thank you.
So both, all lots, all build structures are not contributing?
Correct.
Okay.
Hey, Commissioners, thank you. Eddie, thank you.
Thank you.
We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 names on our list. I'd like to invite Deborah Tempera to the front. And for the record, Ms. Deborah, you just say your full name if I pronounced it wrong.
No, it is Deborah Tempera. So I did not expect to be here so soon about this project because this is supposed to be a project 5 years in the rear, but it moved quickly and I had a feeling it would happen. And it was inevitable, especially after allowing 15, 17 to get that height and mass. So I'll do this very quickly. I have a PowerPoint, and I'll hold up a photograph and talk quickly, and then you can see what I'm talking about. Photographs are always helpful. I feel for Jason on this project because they inherited a site that was in a lot of ways illegally constructed, or aspects of it, zoning, et cetera, was never brought up to date, et cetera, et cetera. But they've been in there for 1 year, and I know this is not a zoning issue, but it's sort of important because in the application it says all things have to be applicable by law. So if you look at a few things, number one, you'll see the picture of the building, and Eddie did have a good picture of the front of the building. You'll see the mass before that. The second picture is a picture with the address of 512 on the doorway. Technically, this is not 512, but has been spoke of as being address 512 South Bond Street. An apartment sits upstairs. The owners prior to them had an apartment, and the apartment basically has been in a legal situation for a long time. But with political connection, there was never, ever any opportunity to get zoning to abide by laws, et cetera, or the housing department, or even the building inspections. So there's number one issue. So my problem with some of this was the site plan. We're presented a site plan, and it's the plot plan. So you see that building 512 is 18 feet wide, and you can see on this photograph, and it's been addressed as such and has functioned as such. And I've been on this block since 1998, so I know what's been going on for a long time. That is it. So there's a problem. Why didn't I put in a 311? I did once try. I tried to find out the consolidation, but, you know, that's all head and hearsay. So we have a problem. So Transform Baltimore comes about. Okay, so that was picture. The next picture is a side view a little bit of the block. And the reason why I bring it up a little bit, because you can see a little bit about the other side of the block. And I think that's really important because we have to have a balance. DRC talks about 1517, this being compatible to 1517, but 1517, if you go down Dallas Street, stops probably about where 508 South Bond Street is, which you can't quite tell where that address is on this warehouse is. So, you know, it's like, okay, so I can understand them doing what they want to do, but the impact on our side of the block, it gets that more commercialism, because if you go forward with this project, you say you're not involved with zoning, but their surveys are all based on getting zoning so they can do a C consolidate and then do a split type of zoning and have the whole downstairs, which currently is used as a construction yard. And all of it technically really isn't supposed to be a construction yard. But, you know, we've lived with this forever. But if you want to do what your application says, that all must be applicable, it's not at its current standing. So, and point being is, with the downstairs being a construction site, does that mean all of the 512 building is then going to become more construction? Because that's the way it'll be on the future zoning. Right now, the impact of Chasen on our block is pretty intense. They park all the time on the pavement. Six-wheelers come up on our street now all the time. They're unloading, and they sit in front of 514, but it's an impact. Looking at this picture here, this gives the other side of the view of the street. I was the first pioneer of this block when no one wanted to live here a long time ago, back in the 1980s. And I worked hard to stop illegal demolition, and we've had 3 of them on this block. One of them I was able to get rebuilt back. The other 2 is now a parking lot. Across the street, the Spakanukas also had a construction yard across the street. It's next door to where the big stone building is. They realized, oh, sorry, what? In all due respect, your last speaker was on stage for 10 minutes. Tom,
You had a couple guys that spoke for at least 5 to 10 minutes.
And even a little bit longer. Okay, I had a feeling this might happen. So let me just go really quickly. The problem with let's go to proper sound light. You have this picture in the rear. There is no main photographs. You can see that the sight line, that it's ragged, and a lot of it. And they'll get the survey, but how do I know whether illegal construction, I mean, I'm sure, but, and, okay, so you do have, I'm nervous now. I do have the pictures of the buildings that are inside. They're still retained inside. It's connected to my wall. We share a wall. They have 4 inches, I have 4 inches. If all of this doesn't come out in the open, I'm going to be going through the same thing I went through with the last illegal demolition on my last side. There just needs to be a little bit more ground and openness and transparency about this. And that's why I'm here. And it's sad that I had thought that Chasen would have straightened all this out within a year, and they've not. And now they're asking to profit on above the building and on the downstairs to have the whole site, I guess, as a construction site at this time. Maybe not in the future, but we have to live with it. And our block is already shortened on the even side of the block. So that's it. I'm sorry, I got nervous.
Do we have any questions for Ms. Deborah? Commissioners?
You have all the.
Yes. Do you have a set of specific recommendations, like, 2 or 3 or something like that?
I did, my one recommendation when I was talking to Nate, unfortunately, he could not say whether the buildings inside were coming down, whether they were putting new footers inside, whether they're going to try to build on what's left of that existing wall in the front that is on the side of my building. None of that he couldn't comment on. He said, it's all based on this survey. And I'm like, okay, you're getting a survey, it's gonna take 5 weeks, you're gonna push zoning, you're starting construction January 1st, if you get through this process that early.
So one
Okay.
thing you'd like is specifically knowing what the process is going to be,
Oh,
right?
well, that was, I
That's
listed
one.
and sent that to Eddie, my questions that I was gonna ask Nate. And we talked for over an hour, and I can't give you that answer right now because we don't have our survey.
So
I think it.
Meaning they had no idea whether the rear was going to be set back with all these irregular property lines. They had none of that information for us right now because my gut feeling is that they're concerned about getting the zoning to make sure they can keep the C1, which I gave you a zoning plot plan, and I worked hard with Transfer in Baltimore, and you saw this. You see the green and the balance, and you got Dallas Street. We've been an island over here, and it's gotten that small. So
you need a
yeah,
survey.
That's one, yes, sir.
What's the second thing?
The second one is structural engineer plans.
Yeah, I think what I heard, and this wasn't clearly stated, but I think this is what we have deduced. You are next door, your house.
I'm adjoining.
Is adjoining the property, and
And I'm
you are
full lot
concerned
coverage.
about the structural integrity of the buildings as they exist now and as they're going to be added onto.
As it's going to be added on, because you have old walls there.
Yeah, absolutely,
and you have
absolutely. I mean, I think that's something we certainly understand how that works
Yeah.
and share your concerns.
Well, but I'm upset to the fact that if you start construction in January, you don't already have a concept plans of drawings of.
Yeah,
I
that
know
timeline's
next
not
one. I
realistic.
gotcha. I
Absolutely,
gotcha. I
yeah.
understand. The mass, I think, may be a little bit much because it's not equivalent to what Dallas Street has done, either with a tear down or
Yeah.
something. I think that's something else to consider.
Agreed.
And, we should have the same respect and have that for our blocks, so we look. I did suggest to Nate that perhaps the entrance is not for residential, is not on 5 thing, because you're gonna now put all your commercialism on the South Bond Street corridor, especially if you get the changes to all C1, that maybe the whatever the boundary lines of the real 512 South Bond Street is, maybe it's 508, that an entrance goes there for tenants upstairs to keep us having a little bit of, more people flow on Bond Street, because it's just not there. And less impact from the construction company that is now currently there.
Do we have any other questions, Commissioners, for Ms. Deborah? Okay, Ms. Deborah, thank you.
You're
Thank you so much. Next on our list, we have Mr. Gregory.
Hello, I'm Gregory Barkman. I live at 1605 Eastern Avenue, which is just right across from Bond Street, Winover. I've been there for 9 years and live above my store. I look at this building every single day. I'm here both as a resident and as a member of the community organization Douglas District. I'd first like to point out, because Deborah, I think, misrepresented a few things. She keeps on saying live. She does not live there.
Slow down, slow down, slow down. No comment and back and forth while anyone is up on the podium. I won't allow that. I know, but I just making it clear. No dialogue between the two while you're on stage or while you're on stage.
The adjoining
Or in the
property on
crowd.
Bond Street is a rental property. And yeah, so the idea of like who's going to be living with us, I'll be living with this other neighbor as well. There were 18 of us at the last meeting, and everybody in the neighborhood was invited. 17 people supported it, just for the record. Jason has come to us numerous times with this property. He's working with people. They're working with the people directly behind to sort out the, I guess, the lot, all that, the problems there. They sat down with the neighbors behind them numerous times. They've been really, really good about that. And yeah, I was just here with the neighborhood letting you know that we are in support of the one-story addition. The building just next to it, they're going up to 5 stories. This was only 4 stories. So as a neighborhood, we're very pleased that they were not adding additional height, just that 4-story mass, which is, in keeping with what they're doing with that building 1 over on Eastern Avenue. So, thank you.
Commissioners, do we have any questions for Mr. Gregory?
I did have, did you say you are a property owner on Eastern?
Yes, so if you're looking at one of the eastern elevations, yeah, if you keep on spinning, I can see your computer, if you keep on spinning around, I'm at 1605 Eastern Avenue.
Okay.
Gregory,
The opposite direction.
Gregory.
So yeah, if you just went the opposite direction, I'm right.
Back up for a second. Eddie was trying to get the clicker for you so he could show us the street.
Yeah. And when you're looking at do you have the elevations of the front? Okay. Okay, so if you're looking at the top elevation, when you cross over Bond Street, there to the left, on the second building in, that 3-story structure, my bedroom and my office and my kitchen look out at this building every single day. As much as I would like to keep everything in Fells Point as small as possible, it's just not realistic. So the 4-story addition, or that next floor addition is very nice as far as the neighborhood is concerned. And it seems much more in keeping with the neighborhood than even the last building that was approved, but that's obviously not why we're here. So anyway, yeah, I've lived there for 9 years now and have been very involved in the neighborhood. And yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Gregory?
There was a meeting in which design aspects were presented, and there was a vote taken of some type?
Yes, yes. So they asked for just what they're asking you today for the mass scale and height. They didn't show any other details other than what you're seeing today, and that's what we saw as well. They shared these with us at the meeting and just asked if we would approve for the 1-story, and then they would come back to us. And we took in good faith they will, as they've told you they will as well.
Is that the official neighborhood association, or?
Yes, so we are part of Fells Point. We overlap with Fells Point Residents Association. It's a rather big association, and because we're separated by H&S Bakery, Fells Point, the main Fells Point Residents Association, you probably see here from time to time more frequently. I don't know, didn't pay quite as much attention back there. So maybe 16 or 17 years ago, before I moved into the area, a neighborhood organization was formed to make sure that little area was taken care of back there. And so we've been meeting very regularly now for, I think about 9 years, ever since I got in the neighborhood, yeah.
Thanks.
Without any more questions, Gregory, thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the list, we have Drew Peace.
Mr. Prettle next. I don't think
We have 3 names. Is your name Mr. Prettle?
But I wasn't going to testify.
Okay, that's fine. Go right ahead, Drew.
Mr. Prettle is, yes.
Okay, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nate Prettle, I'm the Director of Government and Community Relations for the Chasing Companies. I'm here with my colleagues Drew Peace and Reed Matson, as well as the project architect Justin Cito. And I'll be very brief. I want to thank Eddie Leon for his wonderful staff presentation. I think he did a good job of summing up the key issues at play here. And I just want to reiterate that this has been a collaborative process throughout between the developer, CHAP staff, the multiple community associations. We said we met twice with Douglas District and have a unanimous letter of support. We met with the Fells Point Design Review Committee. We had a recommendation of approval for the height scale massing, and have also presented to the Fells Point Residents Association. I don't believe that they took a position either way, but as a courtesy, I presented to them as well. And throughout this, I've been not only meeting with those groups, but the individual neighbors, as previously stated. And the word concept here, I think, is key. I mean, what we're asking for is the ability to continue to move this project forward. And you've heard a lot about this survey, and it really is, that is our next step. Our surveyor and engineer believe that they'll be finished by the end of this month, and once that's finished, we can really drill down what's happening in the back of these properties as the rear of the Dallas Street properties, our 1517 Eastern Avenue and the Bond Street properties come together, what we have from a city block plat to existing surveys from other properties, and what we see with our eyes, none of it matches up. That's not unusual in Fells Point, so we've commissioned a new survey, and they've committed to continuing to work with the individual neighbors, particularly those at 507 South Dallas Street. And I think they're mentioned in the letter. I've met with them twice up on their roof, once with our architect, and we'll continue to do so. And we won't, we're not going to be back here next month. I think the Ms. Temper Pearl mentioned, some start date of January 1st. I've never heard that before. I am the developer on this along with my colleagues. Our schedule will be at least 2, if not 3 additional public hearings. We will, once the survey's finished, we'll know what our zoning request will be. There's no rezoning, as Ms. Temper mentioned, to C1. This is split zone property. We're going to comply with the respective zoning regulations as they split zoning is not unusual. I mean, it's not common, but it happens, now and then, and the zoning board will take up this request, as we submit it. And we plan on being back before this commission for both a schematic or concept design review and, if necessary, for final design details. And we plan on meeting with the neighbors throughout. And so I would urge the commission to approve this concept mass height and scale, and I'd be happy to answer any additional questions. And I will mention, I'm just as committed to working with the owner of the investment property at 514 South Broadway as I am with all of the residents who live there as well. Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes, I just had one question. So we were given pictures of the interior and exterior of the building by Ms. Deborah. You said concept and design reviews in the stage that you're in right now.
Correct.
My question is, are you considering the property next door that was shared with us as relates to what will you do as, the building next to it and going up, will it affect, or how would it affect her property? I'm just trying to get clarity on that after what we saw.
Sure. And I'm not sure what her pictures are. I think they show the inside of a property before Chasen bought it. I mean, I don't have them in front of me, so I can't comment on that. But I think, are we committed to sort of working with her and considering it? That what you're seeing in front of you today, really before we even went to the neighborhood, or certainly before we submitted anything, we went through that process internally for quite a while. And our first plan for this showed actually a 2-story building, because the majority of this site is zoned C1. It allows up to 60 feet. As we know, nothing is by right in a CHAP district. It has to meet the guidelines. But what we settled upon after getting some feedback from the immediate neighbors, and particularly after going through a year-long design review process for the adjacent property in 1517, we heard pretty clearly what the neighbors were expecting on this. And putting all of that together, this is what we came up with, and that includes Ms. Temper and her property at 514 South Bond Street.
Go right ahead.
Can we go back to the Eastern Avenue elevation? Thanks. Is that on the top? Is that where I can't remember, but is that where we landed on the Eastern Avenue elevation of the building next door?
So great question.
Is it 4 stories or 5?
So it's 5, but the real complex portion, which we came back to, Commissioner,
Dallas,
it was the Dallas Street side. And it's this really, and since it's not necessarily relevant to this, but it's this sort of funky, levels and step backs to respect the 2-story houses on Dallas Street, and it was a long process. We're proud of it. It's under construction right now. So that doesn't really come through on here.
I just couldn't remember. I thought it really read as that kind of 4-foot mass on Eastern. I just wanted to clarify that.
And it does, and that's why, and I'll let Mr. Cito, the architect, talk a little bit about, actually I have to answer the other questions about why, the sort of how we got to this 4th floor, the 3rd floor addition here, 500 Bond. A lot of it had to do with the match up to that 4th floor cornice line that you're talking about.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes.
That's for you. What did you say about split zoning?
So the property is zoned C1 and the southern half is zoned R8.
Correct.
And so when we consolidate these, there'll likely be a zoning request. And so the project address would be 500 Bond Street, meaning the rear lot line would almost entirely be our building at 1517. That's likely, this project is likely will comply with density, primary off-street parking, but there may be sort of a technical setback, and until we have this survey, which, and nobody knows what the property lines, I can tell you for sure that someone's property is built onto someone's else. It's not the fault of any of the existing owners or anyone who's in this room today, but really before we make this specific zoning request, and even come back to CHAP for the next schematic design review, we need to know this precise details. But to get to that point, we need the concept approval, so we can continue to move forward.
What's the height limitation in the R district?
In the R district for a multifamily building with fronting on a street that has a 30-foot right-of-way, actually a corner building, or both rights-of-way, 30-foot or more, it's 45 feet. That's for multifamily. For a row house, a single-family row house, it's 35 feet.
Thank you.
Yes.
Nate, before your guest comes up, I want to give the commissioners opportunity to ask you questions.
Yeah, I had just to clarify, because I still am a little bit confused. So in the portion when I'm looking at it, I can see where the zoning changes. So are you saying that you're going to consolidate the whole thing, but you'll keep the C1 zoning where it is and the R8 zoning where it is, and you'll
That is
comply
correct.
with the C1 as it is where it is and the R8 where it is now?
You got it, Commissioner Edwards.
Okay.
That's exactly correct.
All right.
Commissioners, any other questions for Nate? Okay, Nate, you're about to introduce your architect. If you
Justice Cito, thank you.
introduce your full name.
Hi, yes, this is Justin Cito from Cito Architects.
Thank you, sir.
Yep. Good afternoon, Chairman. Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
So just if we need to just go back to the Eastern Avenue elevation, just to quickly recap what we have, what we're doing and what has been approved is we're doing a five-story building on Eastern Avenue, 1517. The fifth story is set back 10 feet from the street. And the building that we're talking about now, 500 South Bond, it's a three-story building, but because the first floor is an existing warehouse, and we're keeping that, and also we're adding one story on top of the existing building, and that actually brings up the height of that new three-story building to 43 feet, and we're trying to line it up with the fourth floor of the 1517 Eastern Avenue building. And that's how that whole, the two building, it's the height relationship, even though one is a four-story building and one is a three-story building. And today we're here to ask for permission for the height massing and scale. In terms of the height, we're adding one-story building and make it into an overall height 43 feet. And we believe that it's it complies with the general context in that area. On the Eastern Avenue side, we basically kind of like step it down to the 43 feet height, and then when we turn around the corner, it actually it kind of matches the scale of the Bond Street buildings. The building next to us, Deborah's building, it's about 36 feet. So our new building with the new addition, it's about like 6 to 7 feet taller than that building, which is, we believe it lines up in terms of the height.
And sir, give me your last name one more time.
Cito, S-E-T-O.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cito. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Mr. Cito?
I do. What, in the process of developing kind of the concept massing, was it considered by the team to step back from either facade?
We're trying to, no, we considered at first doing like a two-story addition and step back the fourth floor, but then we figured like maybe we'll just bring down the height and actually just have it lined up with the existing the warehouse building, just to make that corner has that presence there to complete that, and also try to transition from the Eastern Avenue to the Bond Street side. The rear of the building, which is facing like our rear neighbors on Dallas Street, I mean, our building is not 100% lot coverage for the addition, so it's going to be pulled back in the back. So it's not going to be like built right up against our neighbor's building in the back.
Any other questions? Okay, Mr. Cito, thank you, sir.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Deborah, you may come up.
For the record, those pictures were taken August 20th. The employees on there is Chasen employees. There was some construction work and has been construction work done in there through the process, but you won't find any permits. As far as the zoning, this is confusing because, Mr. Nate, did you say it was going to be R8?
Hold on one second. Like
Oh,
I
I'm
said
sorry.
before, there's no
I'm sorry.
sidebar
Okay.
conversation when you're on stage.
Well, I heard the question. I didn't think zoning was going to come up, but I do think it is. My impression and what I heard also at the Fells Point Homeowners Association, that Mr. Nate said he will be consolidating, and then the next question said, who will you consolidate? He said possibly 500 or 1507, 1517 Eastern Avenue. Now, that was at a hearing. When Nate and I spoke, he told me that he mentioned the split zoning, but I didn't know what that meant, and he didn't go too much into detail. But what I believe is there needs to be a consolidation. And how can you have a construction yard if you're going to keep some of it in R8? And you'll take that away, and then there's something about 10,000 feet lot footage to be able to do a split zoning thing. So this gets a little it's just not out in the open enough, and I just wish it was. Thank you.
We aren't BMCA.
Can I respond very quickly?
That's
Just,
it. That's the last
I
comment
need
for
to be
today.
clear about this because I feel like my words are being misrepresented by Ms. Tempura. There have been nothing but clear in the fact that there will be a lot consolidation. That's the 3 existing properties under common ownership. This is an administrative process. There will be no change in the zoning, and I've never said anything but that throughout it. So it is, I think the concept of split zoning is confusing. It is, but what's there now is what's going to remain in terms of the zoning districts. The building that you see is going to remain as is. The construction use is not expanding. It's a lawfully existing non-conforming use, and actually, this proposed development, which will remove some of our offices throughout the second floor, in many ways will bring this, into compliance with the prescribed uses for C1 and for R8. So if anything, the property will more closely comply with zoning. Thank you.
Mr. Nate, thank you.
I just want to
Go right ahead.
for
Go right,
Nate, I
Commissioner.
guess.
Go ahead. Nate, go right back up to the
Just,
stage.
sorry, Nate. So a few questions. There were some clear comments through the letter from Douglas District and the ARC about further working in detail with the architect, the neighborhood, community members to further the design, communication, and outreach, as well as looking at the integrity of the ground level and how that experience is going to be. And then it seemed like everybody's addressing or wanting a concern about the lot and how that's going to work out. Moving forward, that continuation and will be enhanced of communication and all that we're assuming or I'm assuming and you're continuing that effort. And
Absolutely, and I just add to that, I cannot be any more clear that, frankly, it's a pleasure to work with these groups, and we're in a unique situation where our construction office at 500 Bond and our business office, which is a half a block to the west at 1511, this is our home. We're here every day. I see Seth and the other neighbors, Mr. Barkman, every single day and talking to them. So not only are we on site, but we're working with these people, and and it's really a pleasure. I'm looking forward to continuing to do so throughout the life of this process, and looking forward to being back in front of this commission, hopefully in a couple months.
Commissioners, do we have any more questions? Go right ahead, Catherine.
So I was trying to navigate myself around there in Google Maps over to Dallas. And this is a point we haven't touched about. I know you're looking at getting a site survey to exactly figure out those rear lines. But my question that I can't quite figure out, so you might have a more ready answer, which is the properties that back up to yours from Bond Street, those 2 properties, what is the height of the building or number of stories, on Dallas, that back up to your building on Dallas?
So there are really 2 buildings on Dallas Street. Now I have a block plat. If I can share this with you, maybe it's helpful as well. The main building that backs up to us would be lot 1 right there. That is a 5-story building that is actually taller than the proposed addition, and it's a condo building with 2 units in it. And I mentioned you've been up on the roof working. Those are the neighbors. They're mentioned in the Douglas District letter by name and by address. And if out of any of the neighbors, along with I offer this to Ms. Tempura as well, we plan on working closely not only on some of the lot issues but the structural issues. Once we get to that point, and again, we see them every day, and they're wonderful people, and we assure the commission that we'll continue to work with them every step of the way, even after the hearings, particularly through construction, should we make it to that point.
Commissioners, any other questions? Mr. Nate, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Eddie, can you send us back to our page in the end of the document? Commissioners, we have, after listening to this presentation, we have, is there any further discussion before we put a motion on the floor? Go right ahead, Ann.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of fill in a little bit about the Dallas Street elevation of the other project, just so you can understand that there was a lot of, and this is not the project that we're talking about today, but that Eastern Avenue building that they're building, there was a lot of finessing that to transition the corner to Dallas. And when you go back to the elevation slide, please. Thank you. When you look at that Eastern Avenue elevation, there was a lot of time spent because Eastern has a lot of different heights on it. And so when you look at the left and the right side of the picture of the elevation, you see, very granular, small scale stuff. I think one of the things that's really challenging about this drawing is the fact that we change scales when we drop to the bottom row of elevations. It's like 1.5 times the top. You have a lot of granular character in this neighborhood, and we basically went with this elevation on Eastern because Eastern is a more major street, and once you get a block away, there are larger buildings. I think I understand that even with the split zoning, what I'm hearing is that the addition, the top part of the addition that's in the R zoning piece of this property is still under the 45-foot limit, which they have by zoning right on bond. But I do think that that's where I get concerned about signing off on the massing as a whole in this elevation, because that part of Bond Street is very small scale. Even though it's a wide street, the property is very tiny. And I don't know that, I want to know if we want to have a conversation about introducing some kind of transitional elements on the Bond Street side, because it is, the fence was already done with the original building, but, how do we feel about the addition?
So just to clarify, you're talking about the top story of this property, the 500 South Bond, right?
Yeah, as a comparison, I was saying that the property on the right side, we spent a lot of time on the Dallas Street elevation so that we could create that transitional piece. And that, you basically have a similar, not quite as extreme example, because it's not an alley street, it's Bond Street, but it's still a very small scale street.
Yeah, I agree that the scale jump is kind of drastic. One thing, this is another comment that's not necessarily related to that, but the strip windows that are cut into the facade on both sides, I think that's not helping the scale of the building fit into the context.
Some of it's already there, right? But then.
Are the windows there?
Yeah.
Okay, well, then it's
Not all of
it.
it, Sarah. I appreciate you bringing that up, because
All right, yeah.
that is, I think, amplifying the incongruity of the situation.
Well, no, I see, so I'm looking at one of
But they don't
photos.
extend
It's
over
not
onto-
continuous.
Yeah, it's
And
not
it's the continuity of the strip that I think is not helping
create that
the
transition.
scale fit in as well. And so to look again at how that could be articulated, if you want to put more windows in that zone on what I guess is the third story or whatever of the interior building.
Thank you. Yeah, if you guys.
I would encourage you
pass
to
that
look
around,
again
that's
at that,
what looks like.
what's an opening, maybe consider punched openings instead of a strip.
Commissioners, what's being passed around right now is from the developer. That is a concept illustration of how the Dallas Street elevation was approached with the step down to the lower
We need to get
scales.
Apple AirPlay in here so people can just share.
Oh, God, wouldn't that be something? Yeah, I think, and before everybody starts to flip out, we understand this is height, scale, and massing, we get that. But I think we kind of have to process it a little bit to get to a better recommendation.
Think of it holistically and where the massing, where you can go with the massing, right? So that the kind of little illustration, keep passing, that just came around, that it's stepping back a little bit, which I think is good, but if we approve the massing as was proposed, it's it's the whole box. So we need to keep that in mind. I do agree as well. I would be concerned about, really the only place personally that I have a concern would be Bond Street as well, because it's a much smaller scale. The scale matching up with the building next to it on Eastern, I think, is appropriate, but I am also concerned with Bond Street and think that a step back would be prudent to consider.
When you guys are talking about step backs, is it vertically step down or
Yes.
facade step back?
I think it could be either. I think that.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think that may be like a little too specific at this point in my mind.
Generally speaking.
I don't think that it has to step away on the corner on Bond. Like, there could
I
be,
thought you were-
it could hold the corner on Bond and still be effective.
I thought you were talking about where it starts to transition to the R8,
Correct.
the R zoning, that there should be some transition.
That's what I.
But I thought the architect had mentioned that there is some step down.
It's compliant, is what I heard, I think.
Okay.
I think it's.
So it looks the same. It doesn't look like it.
Yeah, I think
there's
I think he's talking about the other property lines.
Oh, okay.
Interior property lines, not the street property line.
If I understand correctly, by right, what was said earlier is the multifamily is up to 45 by right. The whole roof line right now is proposed at 43. So they are below that right now.
The proposal is below.
The proposed height of the entire thing is below.
I mean, I looked, the DRC, I think DRC and the neighborhood association was pretty clear about their support. I agree the massing, I'm fine with it personally. It's really just the articulation and the design of the building needs to go to the next level. It sounds like it's going to, and I think that would be the thing that I'd want to see going forward, but massing wise, I think it's,
You think that, okay, just so I can make sure I hear you.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
I want you to be heard.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that a non-articulated massing diagram would have been a much more effective way to
Sure.
make this argument.
Oh, yeah.
Because, you get really hung up on, there's the ribbon windows are really, on both elevations that aren't currently there, are really undercutting the success of this.
They should have showed a box.
They should show a box. So if it were a box, you don't have a problem with the volumetric box as a transition on Bond, but perhaps there is opportunity within the articulation of the fenestration and the materials yet to come to kind of start to respond to the more granular Bond Street presence in a way.
Yes, that's a fair.
Whereas I would say that's might be a viable way to approach it, but thinking of it as a box, I believe that some kind of step back needs to be explored, whether it's just at the end of the row houses or it's for the entire Bond Street facade. And it seems that the applicant may be thinking that way kind of already, but for massing and scale, they put in a box. But I would say it's okay, except need to explore setback options to bring it back down at the property line on Bond Street to a similar height to the rest of Bond Street.
I mean, we're looking at what, 6 feet, 7 feet
Yeah, it's
there?
like- it's
I mean,
a-
I just don't think that's
I don't think
a
it's much.
significant enough difference to warrant stepping down. I mean, it's one thing on the other facade where you're going to a low 2-story gable roofed house from 5 stories.
Well, on down the street.
But
Right.
I also
I mean,
think
I
that's a
see that.
little.
But here we've got, a 3-story, 30-plus foot building.
Right, but all you're seeing here, you're not seeing what's across the street too.
Right, I mean, I've looked at the street view.
So that's, I mean, the whole street is a collection of 2 and 3s. So while the one immediately adjacent might not that be far away, you cross the street and you have a couple that are only 2 stories directly across from it. So I don't think you can limit it just to one row house and saying, oh, it's only about 7-foot difference.
Sure. I guess my opinion is I think the massing looks good. And I agree, the windows are very distracting. And I look forward to seeing a better articulated design once you get to that stage. But as far as the massing go, I think it looks good.
And I think we did already previously talk about how there's an effort citywide, in certain areas to make the corners more prominent. So having a kind of single mass at the corner, I think, makes sense,
That
a more
makes
pure
sense to
mass. And then, but the articulation, as we have been saying, could help make that transition smoother.
But to your point, Catherine, is that you feel that's not articulation, that's more massing.
As we're getting to the row houses next to it, I think you have to at least look at it. I don't know that that's really going to be the best answer. I just feel that it should be explored, and if it hasn't really been thoroughly explored, then it should be considered.
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioners, we have any other comments, any questions?
I just want to make sure that people also understand we're not zoning. There definitely should be due diligence. We're very concerned about construction activities and adjacent properties undermining historic buildings. And we are all heartbroken by what happened in Mount Vernon, where we lost a very important beautiful building, because of that. And so I understand the concerns of adjacent property owners, and I think that is something that we take very seriously. That's not what we're here to talk about today. That's all.
Thank you, Ann. I know there was some information that you wrote down, Eric. Would you like to share? Or?
I think in terms of the motion, we have a couple ways that we can go. One of them is there were suggestions of incorporating maybe asking them to study setbacks. Other ones was to approve massing as is, and then they could work on articulation to try to bring that building in more compatibility with its next door. So I think those are the 2 ways of moving forward with an approval with, and it seems like there's different opinions on the commission. So whoever jumps and does the motion first.
Let me ask this for my cohorts who all like to talk or be quiet. So some of the quieter people, what are your thoughts? Do you feel particularly one way or the other?
I'm not satisfied with approving the massing.
Yeah, I'm fine with massing as is.
I think it's supporting.
I'm fine with that, and it seems that you all are too.
Okay, then it seems I might be in the minority, so someone else should probably make the motion.
I would move to accept staff's recommendation for approval of massing and scale.
I'll second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, who was second there?
3 people at the same time.
I'll take it.
We'll give it
Another
to Kate.
Kate's on
Gotcha. All right.
Oh, wait,
Oh, all right. So, thank you so much.